Chapter 2692. The Devil's Fetus 4. This underdeveloped fetus screeched shrilly to the point where Yen-Chen was awakened from his meditation. He opened his eyes and saw this creature at first glance. Naturally, the man was stunned. What is this? Fuyi did not have time to answer him. The colorful light in the palm slowly brightened and twisted the creature. With his level of skill, this effort should be able to crush the creature, but he did not expect it to have the properties of water. It could twist into different shapes according to his spiritual power. Out of the blue, Hao tugged at Fuyi's sleeve and sheepishly said, "Father, its eyes are too scary. I am scared just looking at it." Fuyi looked at the boy somewhat confusedly. Since when was this kid so timid? When he came to his senses, he asked his son, "Should I poke its eyes?" Hao shook his head. "I think it's probably afraid of broiled. If you burn it, perhaps it will not be able to open its eyes anymore." Fuyi did not ask any further questions. Instantaneously, there were a few hot flames in the colorful light in his palm that baked the 4 eyes of that thing had. The unformed creature finally turned into ashes and disappeared. After getting rid of the fetus, Fuyi asked, "Where is the fake Lan Weihu?" He had to remove the magic fetus in her belly quickly. Otherwise, he could not even imagine what chaos would strike them. By that time, Yen-Chen had more or less caught up with the situation after Lan Weihu had briefly explained it to him. He was definitely shocked for a moment. "I was too nervous at the time and left her in the Blue Fox clan. Let me accompany you to go back and look for her." "No, you and Lan Weihu need to return to Tianju Hall. I can go by myself." Yen-Chen was still severely injured. The man had to go back and rest in order to recuperate, so Fuyi did not want to bring him along. Fortunately, Yen-Chen also understood his own condition. Even if he went together with Fuyi, he could not be of much help, so he agreed with him. However, he suddenly recalled something and quickly said, "Celestial Master Zhua, Shijiu is still inside and has not come out yet." Fuyi was stunned. "Bastard! Why didn't you tell me earlier?" Fuyi almost wanted to punch Yen-Chen. Consequently, Yen-Chen felt wronged by the situation. In fact, Celestial Master Zhua came to rescue him in a hurry and asked him not to talk. He had been meditating silently, so how could he have the chance to say it? Nonetheless, he dared not complain. In as few words as possible, he told Fuyi what happened and where he last saw Gu Shijiu. When Fuyi heard the story, he guessed that Gu Shijiu was trying to cause a commotion so that Yen-Chen could escape. That was probably the reason that she started up the battleship and created chaos. Seconds later, he recalled the monster ship that just flew away. Thinking about what might have happened made him sick in the stomach. He turned and immediately disappeared without even taking Hao with him. The baby boy was left dismayed inside. It seemed like his father had left him once again. Fortunately, the muscle and Lu Wu were present, so Hao rode on Lu Wu and patted his head. He ordered, "Let's go. We have to chase after my unreliable father." The big muscle also wanted to follow, but it was turned away by Hao. "You need to send these 2 people back first. Remember, you have to send them back in good condition. We will meet again when we return." Swiftly, the boy flew away on Lu Wu. The big muscle was speechless. It missed its owner very badly and was eager to see her. However, it did not dare to violate the order given to it by the little demon. It reluctantly let Yen-Chen and Lan Weihu jump into its shell and carried them back to Tianju Hall. Fuyi went directly to the Blue Fox clan. The place was undoubtedly in a state of chaos. Chapter 2693. The Devil's Fetus 5. The soldiers of Blue Fox Planet watched their marshal's spaceship rise into the air. Initially, they thought that he was trying to find the female lord. However, in the end, the battleship had instantly disappeared. This made the soldiers very puzzled as they did not know what their marshal was doing. None of them could contact him either as he did not seem to answer his directed audio spell. While the soldiers were still trying to fathom what was going on, a strong wind blew at them, and a man in purple appeared out of thin air. Although Guan Yanning did not know the identity of this man, he was sure that he was an enemy. Finally, he had found somewhere to release his pent-up frustrations. He immediately ordered his subordinates to shoot the man down. As a result, they were all abused by the man in purple. In just 5 minutes, all the guns in their hands had been seized by the purple-robed man and turned into debris right in his palm. Guan Yining was explicitly called out by Fuyi. He was pressed on the ground and had no chance to get up. Fuyi gave him 2 choices. Either he used the fewest words possible to report the whereabouts of Gu Shijie, or he would die and turn into chunks of meat. Obviously, Guan Yining sold out his colleague and reported what he knew of Gu Shijie. She had used a special method to destroy many of our warships here, but I honestly have no idea where she is hiding. What happened to the ship that just flew away? We don't know. That is the ship that belongs to our marshal. Inexplicably, it suddenly flew away and disappeared. This is something that has never happened before. If you are wondering whether Gu Shijie took control of the ship, it is very unlikely. No one can go up to the ship except for the marshal. And the operating system in that ship is different from our other warships. If you haven't studied it, you can't operate it. Even if Gu Shijie entered the cockpit, she would not have been able to drive it away. Nonetheless, we have no idea why our marshal would suddenly run away. Fuyi interrupted him. Can you locate it? Yes, we can mark the location between each warship. Very good. Fuyi took him up to a battleship and said, Bring me to him. Guan Yining was speechless. However, under the intense aura of the man who instructed him, he did not even dare to fart. Just when he was about to start the battleship, the door was suddenly banged behind them. He was shocked and quickly opened the door. Which bastard? Stunned, the man could not finish his sentence. A beautiful little doll pushed him away and walked in with a very fierce beast. Father, we want to go too. The officer was still confused by what was going on, and was very curious. He asked, Mister, may I ask who you are? The skill of this fellow was too terrifying. It was beyond what he could comprehend. When did the Starry Crescent land have so many top masters? Gu Shijie had single-handedly already been a headache to them. But now there was another master here. Guan Yining could not help but feel that his dream of conquering the Starry Crescent land was getting farther and farther from him. "I'm the former Lord Huang Tuesday," Fuyi calmly replied. Then he added, "The price for me to answer you is that you have to chase after that warship. If you don't pay your end of the deal, I will throw you down from the sky." Guan Yining was clearly stunned by the response. He had not expected there to be another lord in this land. If he had known that 2 great masters were guarding the Starry Crescent land, he would never want to come in the first place. "Yes, Lord Huang. Don't worry. I am a master at chasing people." Guan Yining immediately began to locate the ship. After a moment, his face turned green. It has already left Starry Crescent land. In fact, it is now in space. Fuyi did not understand the context of what he meant. He only cared about one thing. Can you catch up to them? Of course. Even if it goes to the horizon, I can locate it. Guan Yining was beaming with confidence. Chapter 2694. Looked so disinterested in actuality, Guan Yining was also a little curious about what was going on. In fact, he was a bit angry as well. The marshal had always regarded him as a confidant. He told him everything that was going on in the past. Many of their plans were formed together. Things took a turn about 2 months ago when the marshal suddenly fainted out of the blue. When he regained consciousness, he seemed to be a changed man. The most obvious difference was that the marshal was a lot colder to him. He did not talk much with him and always made excuses to leave. Also, he did not really care about his subordinates anymore. Despite losing so many comrades and warships, the man seemed oddly calm. The original marshal was extremely protective of his subordinates. What was even more ridiculous was the fact that he adopted a cat. The cat looked very ordinary, but the marshal treated it like a baby. He patted it so horribly that its tail was always upright. There was once when the cat sleeping in the middle of a pathway, and Guan Yining accidentally stepped on the cat's tail. The cat jumped and scratched him with its paw. He subconsciously tossed the cat aside, but the marshal saw his action. As a result, the marshal also flung him to a wall and almost crushed his spine. The cat's life was more valuable than his life. This realization made Guan Yining sad. He simply could not fathom how his comrade's behavior had changed so drastically. It was as if an evil spirit had possessed him. Ever since Lan Weihu had been seized, the marshal had been tormenting her. He tortured the little girl and turned her into a devil, even though he knew that she was a princess on the Blue Fox planet. Was it right to torture a princess this way? Even though they were thieves, these interstellar pirates from the Blue Fox planet had their own principles. Duan Mayan's recent actions were violating their moral creed. In just over 2 months, Guan Yining's team felt separated from the marshal. The fact that he had taken off into space without even notifying him or his men simply amplified the severity of the issue. Therefore, even if Fuyi did not force him to travel to space, he would have gone ahead to investigate the matter himself. Guan Yining wanted to know what the marshal was up to. Without being instructed by Fuyi, Guan Yining had been steering the ship as fast as he could. It was traveling at its maximum speed. Nonetheless, he could not help but look at Fuyi, who sat next to him. This great god was supporting his head with one hand, and looked a little lazy. He had closed his eyes and seemed to be resting. Guan Yining felt a little worried. Since this great god was a man of the Starry Crescent land and had just returned, he must have never seen such high-tech weapons and defenses. Shouldn't he be a little curious? Shouldn't he want to learn how to operate the ship? Why did he look so disinterested? The general had intentionally made his movements more visible to Fuyi while operating the warship. He wanted to show a sense of superiority in front of this god based on how complex it was to pilot the spacecraft. Evidently, Fuyi did not care at all. This made Guan Yining feel somewhat powerless. It was as if he was trying to flirt with a blind man. "Mr. General, you are good at handling this ship." A tender child's voice praised him to save him some face. Guan Yining looked down at the little guy who sat on Fuyi. The little guy's eyes were sparkling like black grapes. He looked very sincere and innocent, which made people want to do everything for him. Guan Yining's lips curved upward proudly. "Of course. I am the best at piloting these ships. All my brothers are certainly convinced." "Are you better than the marshal?" "I don't want to sound boastful. In terms of operating the spaceship, I am more seasoned than the marshal. However, the marshal has other strengths. In fact, he can operate the spaceship without using his hands." Chapter 2695. How did he change? Like this. Dihao blinked his eyes, and a chair started moving around Guan Yining. The general was speechless by what he saw. It seemed that the marshal's ability was not that special, after all. Dihao was rather short due to his age, so he asked Lu Wu to squat and pick him up. Lu Wu obliged and turned into the size of a little pony as it walked toward Dihao. The boy rode on its back so that he could talk to Guan Yining at eye level. "What are your marshal's other abilities?" Guan Yining was not dense to the point where he could not see through the little boy's intentions. "Are you only talking to me to get information about my marshal?" "Your marshal? Are you sure? If he really treats you as a subordinate, why would he run away and leave you all behind?" "He is not running away. He must have some business to attend to right now. Why did he not inform you and your team about this business? And why is he not contactable? He must be aware that my father was present, so he opted to run away and left you all here to keep my father busy and buy him some time. I really admire how you can still stand by him and even stay loyal to him for so long. How do you do it? The two of you must have worked together for a long time, right? It must feel very suffering to work with someone like him." Guan Yining's face and neck turned reddish. "What do you know about my marshal? For your information, Duan Mayan was not like this before." "Really? How was he like in the past? When did he start to change?" "He used to be the closet brother to everyone. He was willing to do anything for us. We all drank and ate together as a community. However, 2 months ago, he had a sudden fall and fainted. We tried very hard and managed to save his life. However, when he was awake, he had completely changed. It felt like he was possessed by some kind of devil and acted very strangely." When Guan Yining mentioned that last part, there was a raging fire burning in his heart. He punched his fist on the console, and was apparently a little angry. "How did he change? Tell me the specific things you noticed." A strong magnetic voice was heard. Guan Yining was stunned. He subconsciously turned back, and saw that Huang Tu had opened his eyes, and was looking at him. Fuyi had caught him at a good time when his blood was boiling. For some reason, the general had the urge to tell the man everything that had happened. Naturally, he began to spill the beans. And with that, Dihao had accomplished his mission. He rode his little pony around the spaceship and returned to Fuyi's side. The little boy even climbed onto his lap. Fuyi patted his head as a reward. He always thought that the marshal came from the royal family of Blue Fox Planet. He also suspected that the man had used Lan Weihu to cultivate the devil fetus in order to conquer the continent. However, after listening to Guan Yanning, he felt that it was far from being so simple. Duan Mayan's soul must have been swapped. When Fuyi guessed this, he needed to ask the general some questions. Nonetheless, he was feeling rather lazy, so he controlled Guan Yanning's mind with his mental power and forced him to reveal the truth. By using a spell, Fuyi could actually read Guan Yanning's memories. However, it would consume quite a lot of spiritual power to use it. He had already exhausted a lot of his spiritual power to come back to the Starry Crescent land. After that, he used more of his power to save Yanchen and help Lan Weihu. It was wise for him to preserve as much energy as possible. Chapter 2696. How big was the man's game of chess? Fortunately, he did not have to use a lot of spiritual power to extract the information he needed. Meanwhile, Dihao lay quietly in his arms. His mouth was slightly tilted upward as he was satisfied with the outcome of his endeavor. Also, he wanted to get compensated for the shortcomings of his childhood. It was rare for him to enjoy fatherly love. Besides, he looked like a little boy now, so it did not look strange for him to hug his dad. Many things had changed since his return, so his parents' fate should have been improved as well, right? However, although his intervention had led to twists in the plot, things that were supposed to happen later seemed to have happened in advance. Moreover, things that had never happened before were happening now. For example, his mother was now entangled with the creator of the universe. Luckily, he knew that she was competent. But as it did not happen in the past, it was difficult to tell what would happen in the future. On the marshal's spaceship, Gu Shizhou maintained eye contact with the Lan Weihu that had emerged from the screen. She frowned as she knew that the woman in front of her was an imposter. Even if her body was genuine, this was definitely not her soul. Gu Shizhou had thought that the Lan Weihu lookalike was with Yanchen. It definitely caught her by surprise to see the woman here. Lan Weihu smiled lightly. However, her smile was no longer the innocent one that Gu Shizhou was familiar with from Lan Weihu. Nonetheless, there was a kind of enchanting charm to it. Gu Shizhou, how are you? Gu Shizhou narrowed her eyes and asked, Wu Wuyan. Lan Weihu startled a little and laughed. However, it was not a condescending laugh. You are indeed the Lord. I am surprised that you can recognize me so quickly. This woman had once used Gu Zijia's body to help Long Fan trap Fuyi. Gu Shizhou had only had one conversation with her in the past. In fact, she has never even seen her original appearance before, but could recognize her by her uniqueness. Gu Zijia's grip of her fingers tightened in her sleeve. She looked at her disdainfully and spoke. I never expected you to still want to work for him. Long Fan was one of Fan Qianqi's many identities. In the past, Wu Wuyan used to serve Long Fan, and now she served Fan Qianshi. She was indeed a loyal subordinate. Wu Wuyan smiled. Of course I would. I only have one master. What about Mo Zhao? Wu Wuyan shook her head before continuing. He was just a chess piece for my master. Even Mo Zhao was Fan Qianqi's pawn. How big was the man's game of chess? He used to stay beside Mo Zhao as a subordinate and listen to his every order. He just wanted to synthesize more clones. At that time, he planned everything in the dark, and then pushed Mo Zhao out in the front line. He was the mastermind behind everything. He had been planning to conquer the Starry Crescent land for over 10,000 years, as evidenced by the existence of the Blue Fox family. This was obviously one of his secret strategies while playing chess with Fuyi. He wanted to harm Fuyi when he experienced life in the Shura world. Although Fuyi was physically strong enough to defend against him, he had not restored his memory as the master of heavenly law. Therefore, it would have been easy for Fan Qianshi to kill Fuyi at the time. Why did he go one big round just to capture Fuyi? What was his real intention? Gu Shizhou bit her lips at her thoughts. She did not have enough information to make an inference, so she could only guess that Fan Qian did all this to deal with Fuyi. She could not think of any other intention. Then, she looked at Wu Wuyan again. Her stomach was slightly bloated. Chapter 2697. Everyone is unique. It would appear that Wu Wuyan had swapped bodies with Lan Weihu. Given the difficulties that Lan Weihu had to go through to get pregnant, Gu Shijiu did not want her body to get damaged. She had to do her best to drive Wu Wuyan's soul out so that little fox could return to this body. She secretly clenched her fists in her sleeves as she was frustrated that she had not learned how to switch people's souls and bodies. Therefore, she had to wait for Fuyi to arrive. She had thought of 1,000 other ideas in her mind of the best way to get Wu Wuyan out of Lan Wei's body. Despite spending a significant amount of time pondering, she secretly shook her head in dismay. Gu Shijiu had other problems to deal with now since she was in Fan Qianqi's spaceship and did not have her teleportation ability here. Furthermore, they had left the Starry Crescent land and came to space. Even if she could teleport out of the vessel, she would not be able to return to the Starry Crescent land with Lan Wei's body. In fact, because of her advanced spiritual power, she would be able to survive the journey back to the lower bound. However, she could not say the same for Lan Weihu. The imposter would probably perish due to the lack of air. Gu Shijiu certainly did not mind if Wu Wuyan was killed in the process, but there was a baby in her stomach. Hence, she could not make any rash moves. Fan Qianshi gave her a rather complicated look. After a moment he smiled. Shijiu, although she is not the real Lan Weihu, she is using her body. You can still be friends with her. Wuyan's temperament is quite good. I think you will get along well with her. After he finished this sentence, he turned around and disappeared. He must have gone to another cabin to maneuver the ship. In the end, only Wu Wuyan and Gu Shijiu were left in the cabin. Wu Wuyan smiled and looked at Gu Shijiu innocently. Shijiu, if you are more comfortable with Little Fox and want her to be by your side, I can imitate her personality and quirks. Upon uttering those words, her physical appearance turned pure and innocent. It was precisely the same as Little Fox's persona. Gu Shijiu faintly replied, "Don't you feel tired always trying to imitate others? Where did you leave yourself?" Wu Wuyan was stunned by Gu Zijia's question. What? Everyone is unique and cannot be replaced. Gu Shijiu toiled with a cup in her hand as she spoke to Wu Wuyan. She continued, "It is better for you to be yourself." Wu Wuyan was speechless. Be herself? She had many different identities these years. She was a man, a woman, a kid, a hero, a thief, a soldier, and even a pawn. As long as her master needed her, she would imitate anyone the best that she could. Fan Qianqi's subordinate had spent a lot of time researching other people's personalities. But what was her own genuine personality? She suddenly experienced a moment of grief as she forgot her true self. Gu Shijiu stared at her before asking, "You don't even remember what you are like, do you?" Wu Wuyan remained silent. She tightened her lips together and did not talk for a while. Gu Shijiu stood up and proceeded to walk in a circle around her. Even if you do not remember your original appearance, you should remember your own origin, right? Wu Wuyan sneered. Don't try to get information from me. Even though Wu Wuyan dismissed Gu Zijia's question, there was an emptiness in her heart at that point in time. Her own origin? Maybe she had lived for too long and carried too many identities. She actually forgot where she came from. She could not even remember when she started to serve Fan Qianshi. It seemed that she had been following for as long as she could remember through his various identities. It seems that you don't even remember your own origins, and you certainly don't remember your parents. Gu Zijiu sounded soft and mellow, but it felt like a hammer hitting Wu Wuyan's heart. Wu Wuyan smirked and proudly replied, "Parents? I have lived for thousands of years. I am not concerned about remembering something irrelevant. I only need to remember my master." Gu Zijia's eyes flashed slightly. No matter how much time had passed, no one would forget their parents. The only reasonable explanation was that she was orphaned since she was a child. Gu Shijiu had always found her to be a unique character. Did Fan Qianshi specially create her? Chapter 2698. She was a killer, a chess piece understanding Fan Qianqi's nature. It certainly seemed like something he would do. Gu Shijie looked down slightly and suddenly asked, "What about Long Sai?" It was a very normal question, but Wu Wuyan lost her cool out of the blue. She paused for a second and then sneered again. "What about him? Don't you remember him?" "Why would I remember him?" Wu Wuyan asked. "Oh, since you don't remember, he actually—" Gu Shijie suddenly paused and decided not to continue. She just smiled and closed her eyes slightly. Wu Wuyan glanced at her and pouted her lips, but in the end, she did not add anything. She sat on a chair with her hands supporting her head to one side as if she was taking a nap, but her eyelashes trembled slightly even though her eyes were closed. The woman had lived for 10,000 years. There was nothing that she had not experienced or seen. She was well aware that Gu Shijie was trying to trap her, and she did not want to be fooled. Nonetheless, the serenity of her mind was certainly absent. As far as Wu Wuyan could remember, she always seemed to lack emotions. She had played many characters and been attached to different men throughout her life. Naturally, she had slept with some of them before. She had played the role of a loving partner, but she had never been sincere about it deep down in her heart. She would not hesitate to kill any of her partners if she needed to do so. She was that heartless. It was only when she was with Long Sai that she had some inexplicit feelings that she could not understand. It was the first time she could not bear to kill someone. Of course, this feeling was very ambiguous. She did not think this was love, but Long Sai certainly warmed her cold heart more than any other man. She had received numerous missions since leaving Gu Zijie's body, before eventually being tasked to roam the Blue Fox planet as a spy. She had only returned to the Starry Crescent Land recently. After she returned, the Starry Crescent Land had changed significantly. Many people that she once knew were no longer present, including Long Sai. She secretly made inquiries, and most of the people claimed that he had disappeared after experiencing a catastrophe. Some said he went to the upper bound to become an immortal. Others said that he had turned into dust after the catastrophe. They could not even find a strand of his hair. There were various stories about him, but none of the statements could not be verified. Hence, Wu Wuyan never knew what happened to the man. After all, she was Fan Qianqi's subordinate. She was a killer, a chess piece. She worshipped him, and was willing to be used by him. Fan Qianshi had many assassins at his disposal, but he had abandoned a number of them over the years. Wu Wuyan was the only one that he would bring with him regardless of his identity. He told her that to be his chess piece, she had to be faithful to him, and could not even have her own personal feelings. She obliged, and she did it very well. Even though she developed a strange feeling toward Long Sai, she did not show it. So, she did not expect Gu Shijie would bring him up today. Long Sai's figure appeared in her mind. She had not seen him for more than 200 years, and certainly did not expect to remember him so clearly. She definitely wanted to know if he was still alive. However, she could not ask Gu Shijie. In fact, she could not even reveal any concerns for Long Sai. Otherwise, Fan Qianshi would remove all her concerns from existence. She glanced at Gu Shijie at the corner of her eyes and noticed Gu Shijie looked calm, and did not have any intention to talk. Chapter 2699. Loyalty. She closed her eyes, and her lips twitched slightly. Her greatest strength was her endurance, and she was not about to let someone manipulate her. The two of them did not speak, so there was silence in the cabin. The only noteworthy activity in the cabin was the small copper incense burner on the corner table, that exuded a milky scent. Although Wu Wuyan had been very quiet and had her eyes closed, she was feeling rather agitated. Her hand lightly touched her belly, which was growing day by day. When she returned to the Starry Crescent Land, she was already placed in this body. Her master told her that she had a small life in her belly, because the owner of this body was married. What she needed to do was to seduce her husband to have sex with her. Only then would her task be completed. Wu Wuyan still possessed Lan Weihe's memories, and they felt like they were her own. She could feel the love that Lan Weihu and Yan Chen had shared over the years. She truly could not believe that there was such a love in this world, which convinced her that the task would be an easy one. She did not expect Yan Chen to reject her constantly. The moment when Yan Chen ran away with Lan Weihu, She knew she was exposed. Although she did not know where she fell short, it did not matter now since she had failed. She found her master quickly reported everything to him. She thought that Fan Qianshi would give her a very harsh punishment, but instead he only asked her to follow him to the main ship. He had told her that he would find an opportunity for her to make up for it. Naturally, she wanted to make up for her failure. She was very grateful to be given a second chance. Nonetheless, this time, Fan Qianshi did not assign any complicated tasks to her. He asked her to come out and stay with Gu Shizhou to prevent her from causing any trouble. Fortunately, Gu Shizhou had been very calm and did not seem to be plotting anything, which made Wu Wuyan heave a sigh of relief. Now that her master had left, if Gu Shizhou really wanted to attack her in this body, she would not be able to fight against her. The other party would probably destroy her. Although she did not cherish this body, she did have a feeling of affection for the baby in her stomach. She had occupied so many bodies in the past, but none of them carried another life in them. She experienced how the baby grew in her belly each day over the past 2 months. She even sensed the fetal movements that a pregnant mother would. This brought a little warmth to her cold heart. If she personally gave birth to the child, would the child be hers? Would he be close to her? When she got on the ship with her master, she was worried that he would order her to kill the baby. Instead, he asked her to treat the baby with care, which was a relief to her. With all these thoughts in mind, she caressed her stomach and raised the corner of her lips. In the past, she only had her master, and she lived like a relentless machine. But now, she had a child with her, one which she was considering to call her own. After all, they had already left the starry crescent land. Yan Chun and Lan Weihu would not be able to chase after them. Although Gu Shizhou had not spoken or even looked at her, her mind continued to focus on Wu Wuyan's actions. Chapter 2700. Loyalty 2. She watched carefully as Wu Wuyan regularly caressed her belly, and put on a smile on her pretty face. It was a warm and motherly smile. Therefore, Gu Shizhou understood that this other party genuinely cared about the kid in her stomach. This newly acquired knowledge was beneficial to Gu Shizhou. It was good if she cared for the baby as well. That would make her next moves more convenient. Have you ever raised a pet? Gu Shizhou suddenly asked an unrelated question. Wu Wuyan was momentarily stunned but answered coldly, "No. I actually raised a few pets before. Each of them has their own personality. They are entertaining nonetheless." It seemed like Gu Shizhou was bored and wanted to have a casual chat with her about pets. Despite the topic of the conversation seeming rather trivial, Wu Wuyan was still on her guard as she was afraid of any unforeseen traps from her enemy. However, over time, she realized that Gu Shizhou had only talked about her pets. She introduced all of her pets to her, like the big mussel, Luwu, wind collar, clouded leopard, and so on. She did not ramble on about them but was definitely enthusiastic when she described them. All her pets had their own personalities and shortcomings. Therefore, it made their character extremely distinctive. Drawn by the complexity of her pets, Wu Wuyan was progressively attracted to her topic, and occasionally contributed to the sharing. There were even times where she did not agree with Gu Zijia's parenting. "You have given them too much freedom. It is easy for them to become rebellious and out of control." Gu Shizhou chuckled. "Why must we control them? Aren't they independent individuals? They should have their own life. I treat them as friends, and they treat me the same. They will fight hard for me whenever they were required. I believe there is no need to train them like machines. They are not my accessories. Even though I am their master, I can't control every aspect of their lives." Wu Wuyan remained silent, but her heart seemed to be shaken. She looked down at her hand, and was reminded that she was in someone else's body. Although her soul was free to enter any other human body, she would not actually be that person or live that person's life. No matter how well she could imitate them, she was still a substitute. In fact, she could not even remember her original appearance and personality. Everything she did was for her master. Perhaps she was more loyal than a dog. Every pet had its own appearance at the very least. And Gu Zijia's pets even had their own personalities. Nonetheless, her owner had treated her very well. He always brought her along for all his journeys. Presumably, in her master's heart, she was indispensable. She would be his favorite pet, at the very least. Loyalty was all that he asked for. She only needed to be faithful to him. If she were well behaved, her master would never abandon her. Thus, there was no need for her to care about her own appearance and personality any further. She closed her eyes and meditated. In another cabin, Fan Qianxi's appeared to be in a gloomy mood as he stared at a black and gold plate. There was a light red worm lying on the plate. The worm looked somewhat lifeless and dehydrated. It looked long gone. The sight of this worm made Fan Qianshi clench his fingers in his sleeve. A sharp light flashed in his eyes. He could tell from the worm that his enemy killed the mother fetus, which he planted in Lan Weihu. That was a massive loss to his plan. It seemed that he had no choice but to go ahead with this backup plan. He heaved a sigh as he sat strangely at a table and put out 7 jars. Then he held out 3 fingers and cast a spell. Gradually, it became visible that there were beads of blood on his other 7 fingers. He placed the blood droplets onto the sealed jars. Chapter 2701. Loyalty 3. These blood beads fell on the jar and spread around the containers. After a while, the jars trembled slightly as though they were alive, and mist began to rise into the air. The color of the mist that appeared on each jar was different: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, navy blue, and purple. The jar looked rustic and had complicated patterns engraved on them. The designs looked like insects and beasts scattered all around the jars. In the foggy mist, the designs seemed to twist and toil, which made it look like they were coming alive. Meanwhile, the color of the jars gradually changed as well, each getting redder than before. Apparently, there was something in the jar. The beads from Fan Qianxi's fingertips continued to drop onto the jars and evaporate with the mist. As the jars continued to shake vigorously on the table, there was a dull scream coming from the insides as if some evil beasts were held captive inside and could not escape. It sounded like the cries of many grievances that would easily run chills down anyone's spine. The mist gradually grew thicker while the patterns became more vivid. Additionally, a pinkish liquid that looked similar to the ones from peach blossom petals that bloomed in March appeared to ooze out of the jar. It looked delicious. It was clear that the entire process took a lot of energy and effort. Fan Qianshi only collected a few drops of the liquid, but already had sweat all over his forehead. By the time he managed to accumulate a glass of the liquid, he was already drenched in his own sweat. When he was done with everything, the mist hovering above the 7 jars finally dissipated, and the pattern on the jar seemed to become lifeless again. Fan Qianshi smashed the jars all at once. He was relieved that everything was done according to the plan. He waved his sleeves, and the 7 jars turned into dust altogether. He held the precious liquid in his hand with a faint smile on his face. Having some time to relax, he flipped a switch and managed to access CCTV footage of Gu Shijio and Wu Wuyan sitting in the cabin silently. His gaze fell on Wu Wuyan's face, and he sighed softly. Wu Wuyan was the most loyal dog under his command. He really could not bear to sacrifice her, but he then turned his eyes to Gu Zijia's face and stopped for a moment. There was a sense of unwillingness at the bottom of his eyes. He had been working hard for so long to get to where he was today. He was really so close to success. He could not let himself lose the upper hand now. With that thought in mind, he left the room. Fan Qianshi emerged from the screen like a ghost again. Gu Shijio did not seem to be surprised to see him this time, but was secretly on her guard. On the other hand, Wu Wuyan was relieved to see her master return. Finally, she did not have to worry that Gu Shijio could give her a hard time. What did you both talk about while I was gone? Did you enjoy each other's company? Fan Qianshi smiled as he casually asked. It was good. Miss Gu told me stories about her pets. Wu Wuyan did not hide anything from Fan Qianshi. Fan Qianshi did not have any visible reaction to her statement. However, he answered, her pets are interesting, but they are not very useful. I treat them as friends instead of using them as tools. Why would I care whether they are useful or not? Gu Shijio could not hold her thoughts back. Fan Qianshi shook his head slightly and faintly replied, Shijio, remember that a pet is a pet. We only raise them if they are useful. Since we are responsible for raising them, We need to make sure that they obey us. Only then will they be truly obedient and listen to our orders. It seems that this is your way of training a pet. It is extremely cruel in my opinion. What if one day they are injured and are no longer useful? Are you going to kill or discard them? Chapter 2702. Loyalty 4. Fan Qianshi smiled and did not deny it. Of course. If they are useless, why would anyone want to keep them? But what if they have done a lot for you in the past? It is their duty to work for me. It does not offset anything. At most, I will make their death less painful. What about your subordinates? Will you treat them the same? Fan Qianshi laughed. Shijio, are you trying to provoke the relationship I have with Wu Yan? He then turned to Wu Yan and asked, Wu Yan, are you provoked by her question? Master, rest assured. I am absolutely loyal to you. Fan Qianshi asked again. What would you do if I asked you to kill yourself? I will do so without hesitation. Wu Yan's words were loud and clear. Fan Qianshi stretched out his hand to pat her on the shoulder as he said, Wu Yan, I have always known that you are the best subordinate that I have had. I am very grateful. As soon as he lifted his sleeves from her shoulder, he had a glass of wine in his hand. Come, this is a reward for you. Wu Yan bowed her head and thanked him. The glass was white as jade, but the wine was like the juice from the peach blossoms in the month of March, exuding a kind of unspeakable sweetness and fragrance. The aroma actually caused some movement from the fetus in her belly, and made her swallow her own saliva. She had no doubts about Fan Qianshi's intentions. Since this was a reward for her, she could drink it without hesitation. There was a smell of blood in the wine, but after Wu Yan took a sip, she was hooked and felt a desire to finish it. Even though there was some sputum on her lips, she was only interested in the wine and wanted to gulp it down. Shwa! A colorful light emerged out of nowhere and hit the glass in her palm. Payak! The wine glass shattered as it hit the ground, and the wine spilled all over the ground. Wu Yan looked up and yelled at Gu Shijio, Bitch, what did you do? Her eyes were bloodshot as she rushed toward Gu Shijio at full speed. Meanwhile, Fan Qianshi's facial expression suddenly changed. He did not expect Gu Shijio to intervene, and had not paid much attention to her up to this point. Moreover, she was too swift that he did not have time to stop her. Nonetheless, he did not have time to deal with the culprit at this moment. His attention was on the spilled liquor, which he had spent a lot of effort to obtain. Quickly, he waved his sleeves, and a light covered the wine. Fortunately for the man, he managed to salvage some of the spilled wine, and put it into another wine glass. As the ground was made of some special materials, it actually absorbed part of the liquid. Fan Qianshi only managed to collect 3/4 of the original amount. On the other side of things, Gu Shijio managed to dodge Wu Yan's attack very smoothly. She sighed and informed Wu Yan of the contents of the wine. The wine is poisonous. You can't drink it. What are you talking about? My master will never poison me. Gu Shijio sneered. The wine is definitely poisonous. Although she could not see what the wine was made of, she could smell blood from the glass of wine. Furthermore, based on the way that Wu Yan charged at her after only taking a sip, she could tell that this behavior was not normal. She must have been affected by the wine. Chapter 2703. Loyalty 5. Frankly, Gu Shijio was rather surprised that Fan Qianshi would try to poison his own subordinate. Therefore, she did not pay attention to it at the beginning. After all, what reason would he have to kill her? Unless perhaps this was to induce an abortion and get rid of the kid in her belly. Nonetheless, the smell of the liquid did not seem quite right to a trained physician like Gu Shijio. Wu Yan's response was also rather odd. Quickly, she stole a glance at Fan Qianshi and saw that he was occupied by the spilled liquor. Wu Yan. Finally, he opened his mouth and called for his subordinate, who was on the verge of attacking Gu Shijio. Rest assured, the wine is fine. I have collected it for you. Come, you can have it again. He handed over the glass of wine to her again. Wu Yan was surprised. She had been with Fan Qianshi for many years, so she understood his likes and dislikes. Apparently, the man valued cleanliness a lot. Even if something precious had fallen to the ground, he would not want it anymore. But now, the man had actually consumed his spiritual power to collect some wine off the ground. This was strange for him to do. She hesitated for a moment, and Fan Qianqi's facial expression turned serious all of a sudden. What's wrong? Are you afraid that this wine is poisonous? Wu Wuyan stammered. No, I am not. Fan Qianshi laughed and gently continued. If this wine is really poisonous, do you plan to turn down this reward? His voice may have sounded gentle, but the message was ice cold. Wu Wuyan did not dare to say anything else. She picked up the glass of wine from his hand and said, Master, you have overthought. I have never doubted you. Fan Qianshi faintly replied, What if I really want to kill you? The more he spoke, the more Wu Wuyan felt silly for thinking that the wine was poisonous. If the king wants his minister to die, the minister has to die. If you really want to kill me, I am willing to die for you. She closed her eyes and raised the glass to her lips. At this moment, Fan Qianshi was prepared for anything that Gu Shizhou could do to stop him. In fact, he had silently set up a wizardry barrier in front of Wu Wuyan. Therefore, if Gu Shizhou were going to take another shot at the glass, she must break through this barrier first. Whatever it was, she was not going to get the same opportunity as she did before. Believing that he had sufficiently convinced Wu Wuyan, he knew that nothing could stop him anymore. Pang! There was a muffled sound outside the ship, which sounded as if it had collided with a rock. A slight tremor was felt on the ship from the impact. Gu Shizhou and Fan Qianshi were able to keep their balance, but Wu Wuyan lost her balance, and the glass in her hand flew out in the motion of a parabola. Peck! The glass of wine was shattered on the ground again, and its contents covered the floor again. Wu Wuyan was frightened and immediately kneeled. Master, I did not do it intentionally. Fan Qianshi was speechless. The blue veins on his forehead popped out of his head at once. He raised his hand and was going to do something, but Gu Shizhou was quicker than him. She waved her sleeves and covered the wine in flames. By the time Fan Qianshi was able to block the fire, the liquor on the ground had almost completely dried up. You! Fan Qianshi suddenly raised his head and stared at Gu Shizhou. The aura that he had been concealing had suddenly surrounded his body. A number of objects in the cabin shattered under the immense pressure exuded from his body, and his palms were blazing with a light that was ready to destroy anything in his path. Wu Wuyan opened her eyes widely. She recognized this move from the man. He would only use this move when he was extremely angry. If he used this attack, she was sure that Gu Shizhou would disintegrate into dust along with the entire warship. If it were just a glass of wine, this reaction certainly seemed excessive. Was there really something in the wine? Just as the realization hit her, she felt some heat radiating in her stomach. She also noticed that her belly seemed to swell. Her pretty face turned ashen very quickly. Fan Qianshi noticed this, and thought that the wine must be starting to take effect. He slowly retracted his palm, and waved his sleeves to the front of the spaceship instead. In an instant, the wall had turned into a window so that he could see the outside of the ship. He wanted to see what had hit his ship earlier. The man had set up an autonomous driving feature that could automatically avoid any obstacles. Therefore, it was extremely strange for his ship to have collided with a rock in space. Having looked outside, he saw no reason why the ship would have to collide with any objects. He involuntarily frowned and wondered if the mechanism in his ship was failing him. Although it was rather odd, he did not have time to deal with it now, so he cast a spell to clear the path of the warship in order to prevent any other accidents. While doing so, he saw Guan Yining's battleship in the distance. Why was this guy chasing after him? Did he come here to die? If so, he would fulfill his wish. He waved his sleeves again, and Gu Shizhou saw that the controls emerged out of nowhere. Apparently, they were already in the control room, but the facilities inside were hidden away by Fan Qianqi's mysterious abilities. Gu Shizhou had also caught sight of the battleship and recognized that Guan Yining owned it. She frowned a little as she did not expect him to chase after them. Was the general unhappy that his marshal had left him? Chapter 2704. Abandoning Guan Yining's ship, the general's eyes were wide open. He looked at Fuyi in awe. The man next to him was able to move such a large meteorite here in space to block the marshal's path. The general had maneuvered his battleship to catch up with Fan Qianshi, and finally caught a glimpse of it. He was about to establish a radio connection with the man's ship, but did not expect Fuyi to stop him. Right after that, this god waved his sleeve from inside the cabin, and the giant meteor that was the size of a hill blocked the path of his marshal's battleship. It all happened so quickly that there was no time for the autopilot features in the ship to avoid the large space rock. Guan Yining was now somewhat familiar with telekinesis after seeing it somewhat regularly over the past few months. However, he had never seen it done so effortlessly. Although Fuyi's abilities marveled him, what came next made the man's jaw drop. The remote cannons on the marshal's battleship emerged, and were aimed at Guan Yining's ship. Frantically, he screamed, "That's the soul-chasing cannon! Gone! We are gone!" This cannon was the most potent weapon in the main ship. Once it was issued, it would automatically lock and track its target. Even if the ship that it was aiming at could travel 800 miles away, it would still go after it and destroy it. The power of this cannon could turn the entire warship and the people inside it into dust. They usually used this kind of cannon to deal with the enemy, but now the marshal was actually using it to deal with him. Since Guan Yining did not actually fire at the marshal's ship, he was in a hurry to contact the other party and explain the situation to them. However, the other party did not give him a chance to even breathe. The muzzle was now glowing with a blue light. Guan Yining quietly closed his eyes and just waited for his doom. However, after a moment he opened his eyes and found himself still standing in front of the console. Meanwhile, Fuyi was missing. Oddly, little Hao was also with him. Hao was currently sitting on Lu Wu's back, while pressing the buttons on the console of the ship. He maneuvered the warship into the meteorite array, and stopped right in front of a cloud-shaped meteorite. Guan Yining was speechless. Could anyone tell him what was happening at this very moment? How did the cannon not hit them? Also, where did this little guy learn how to operate this ship? The general was once branded as the smartest student of his year. Even then, it took him a month to learn how to operate this battleship. The little kid was playing with the console, as though it was a toy. Where did this little guy come from? Guan Yining genuinely wanted to know. Are you shocked? Hao finally had a chance to look at him sympathetically. Guan Yining opened his mouth, but as countless questions were running through his mind, he did not know which one to ask first. Fortunately, Hao made his choice for him. I know that many questions are circling your mind, but if you don't ask me anything, then you can live a little longer. With that message, Guan Yining sealed his mouth tightly, and just looked into the distance. From where his battleship was located, the marshal's ship was the size of a matchbox. The ship seemed to be stationary as if trying to find its target. However, there were rays of light that emerged from the ship every now and then. Based on Guan Yining's knowledge of the features of the ship, he suspected that the lights that were issued from the ship were used as a way to explore the path ahead of them. From what he knew, there was no way that they could hide from his ship for long. Just seconds after that thought, those rays of light seemed to shine in their direction. However, it did not seem to detect them. Chapter 2705. Abandon. 2. Guan Yining held his breath and quickly looked at the locator on the console of his ship. It was bizarre that the marshal's ship did not seem to spot them. No need to check it anymore. The locator has been destroyed, and my father has set up a wizardry barrier outside the battleship. The other party can't locate us. Hao kindly explained the situation to him. Guan Yining breathed a sigh of relief, and could finally pay attention to the main ship without freaking out. After putting things into perspective, he felt a sense of disappointment from what he had seen. I didn't expect him to really want to kill me. In the past, the two of them were close like the brothers, but now, he wanted to kill him because of a small matter. The general just could not believe it. Perhaps he is not your marshal. Someone else may have occupied his body. Didn't you say that he had changed a lot over the past 2 months? Guan Yining choked on his saliva as he did have had this suspicion. However, the people from the Blue Fox planet had a unique body that prevented others from possessing it. Moreover, Duan Mayan had a profound spiritual strength. Someone weaker could have their bodies possessed, but not the marshal. It was simply unfathomable. With that last thought in mind, Guan Yining was adamant about checking on his dear brother to see if he was possessed by someone else. Meanwhile, Dihao was focused on the spaceship in front of him. Guan Yining stared at him but did not know what was going on. He seemed to be looking at a little kid, but he felt as though he was looking at a leader that sat in a very high position. In fact, his body was carrying a faint aura around it. What are we going to do here? Guan Yining could not help but ask. Wait. Dihao spat out a word. What were they waiting for? Guan Yining did not dare to ask another question. And Dihao was not interested in entertaining him anyway. Inside the main ship, Fan Qianshi squinted his eyes to check his surroundings. He was excellent at using the cannon on his spaceship, so he believed that he had hit his target. Right after taking his shot, Guan Yining's battleship had immediately disappeared. The ship might have disintegrated into ashes. Fan Qianshi looked at his locator again, and could not locate the other ship. However, he had a tingling feeling that things were not so simple. It seemed too easy. He thought that he would at least have to fire a few shots or watch the target fly around before eventually being destroyed. He switched on the infrared search feature and checked his surrounding area within a few hundred miles. There was still nothing that popped up on his radar. Did he really take Guan Yining out? He did not even have time to ask the man for an update on the situation down below. This made him slightly regret his impulsive action. Behind him, Wu Wuyan had been sweating profusely and sat down on a chair. Her belly was expanding like a balloon. The sudden expansion definitely caused her some pain. Moreover, the heat that she felt in her belly made it seem as though there was a dragon living in her stomach. The pain was excruciating. Gu Shijiu frowned at the side while watching everything unfold. At first, she thought that Wu Wuyan was going to lose the baby. However, right now, she was not so sure. It seemed as though the child was being forced to exit her womb. What was in the wine that she drank? Gu Shijiu grasped Wu Wuyan's wrist and checked her pulse. It seemed completely out of control. Furthermore, there seemed to be some kind of suction on her skin. When Gu Zijia's finger touched her hand, it felt as though something was sucking on it. Chapter 2706, Abandon 3. Fortunately, Gu Zijia's reaction was quick. She loosened her grip swiftly and managed to free her hand. Even so, her index finger was burning hot. When she looked at her finger, there seemed to be a cloud-black gas hovering over it. The cloud then formed into the shape of a skull that seemed to be laughing at her. Gu Shijiu had goosebumps from looking at it. She immediately cast a spell with her spiritual power to dissipate the black gas on her finger. Within seconds, her finger returned to normal. This was her first time experiencing such a strange phenomenon. She frowned and did not dare to make any rash decisions. Pong! Wu Wuyan struggled in pain, and eventually fell to the ground. Her face had turned pale due to the pain from the accelerated growth of her belly. She had the thought of removing her soul from Lan Weihe's body, but resisted the urge to do so. If her soul were to leave the body, it was likely that the child would die. Despite Wu Wuyan twisting and turning in pain all over the ground, her master did not even turn back to look at her. This struck Wu Wuyan hard. The wine. What was in it? She asked softly. It was a potion to accelerate the growth of your baby. Fan Qianshi finally looked at her. His voice was icily calm. Wu Wuyan's hand trembled as she caressed her belly. She had not delivered a baby before, so she did not know if the pain she was experiencing was normal. Nonetheless, she was willing to bear the pain as long as she could see the baby alive and healthy. Something is not right. Gu Shijiu snorted as her eyes watched Wu Wuyan's belly. There was a colorful fog around her belly that had exuded a rather gloomy and chilly feeling. That was an evil aura. It was similar to the cloud of haze that Gu Shijiu saw hovering above her finger, only that it was thicker and more abundant. How could Lan Weihe's baby come with an evil aura? What was inside Lan Weihe's belly? Wu Wuyan was so miserable, so she did not even see the colorful light. She subconsciously asked, What is wrong? You do not have a baby in your stomach. Gu Zijius pinched her fingers together and shot a ray of light toward Wu Wuyan's belly. However, it was blocked by some colorful magic and bounced back at her. Fortunately, Gu Shijiu was able to dodge it in time. The ray of light hit a table, and it disintegrated in an instant. Was this thing so powerful? Gu Shijio subconsciously knew that a great danger was before her. She did not hold back, and took the opportunity to fire a few rays of light at Wu Yuan's belly. However, no matter what spell she cast, the end result was the same. More and more pieces of furniture ended up getting destroyed. The repeated attacks did no damage whatsoever to Wu Yuan's belly, but Gu Shijio could see that the colorful evil gas was becoming more and more potent. It also seemed to be converging into the face of a baby. Although the baby seemed to be smiling, one glance was enough to confirm that it had an evil grin on its face. Wu Yuan finally noticed the wicked child's face. The child was smiling at her. When their eyes met, the child even licked his lips. Wu Yuan could see that there were needle-like teeth inside the mouth of the child. It was certainly a scary sight coming from a baby. What was this monster that she had been carrying? Without delaying any further, she closed her eyes and started to execute the soul separation process. She had always been very good at using this skill, and could easily pull her soul out from any body. However, for the very first time, she failed to do so. No matter what she did, she could not break free. It seemed that her soul was trapped inside this body. Chapter 2707. Abandon 4. Despite the excruciating pain of feeling that her stomach was going to burst at any time, Wu Yuan could not separate her soul from Lan Weihe's body. Her constant struggles had drenched her entire body in sweat, which made her feel very uncomfortable. Since there was a demon inside her, she decided to stretch out her hands to her belly. Her fingers were comparable to the sharpest knives in the world, and now, she wanted to use them to cut her abdomen and take out this monster. To her surprise, the colorful evil gas did not stop her hand. But when her hand was about to reach her growing belly, a green light seemed to blast it. Wu Yuan screamed in shock. Her fingers were broken. However, her heart hurt even more. Her angry eyes looked to the culprit who fired the green light at her. She looked at him unbelievably and asked, Do you want to kill me? Fan Qianshi looked at her fingers that were twisted and her physical appearance that looked like she had drowned in water. His pupils shrunk for a while, but he still calmly replied, Wu Yan, to sacrifice you is my last resort. You don't have to struggle anymore. Accept this reality. Wu Yan was speechless. This attack was obviously fatal to her. She was so loyal to him like a dog, but now he abandoned her so easily. You finally don't want me. She straightened herself up and continued. You said that you would always take me with you and never abandon me. She felt very hurt and confused by his actions. Fan Qianshi heaved a sigh of relief. Again, this is not abandonment. This is the last resort. If you drank all the wine just now, it would make your death quick and less painful. However, you spilled it. Then kill me now. Wu Yuan screamed hysterically at him. It was really hurting her, and since she was going to die sooner or later, it was better for her to find relief sooner than later. Fan Qianshi looked away. Again, this is what you have to bear. She could not die before the monster in her belly was born. If she entirely consumed the wine he refined, the evil aura in the wine would have accelerated the process even faster. However, because she did not drink at all, the monster took more time to be formed. Wu Yuan's fingers were tugging the corners of Fan Qianshi's robes, but after hearing what he had said, she slowly loosened her grip. You are so cruel. You don't even want to reduce my pain. She was desperate to die at this point, but Fan Qianshi was no longer looking at her. In a last attempt to pacify the situation, he turned to face her and said, You will only suffer for a while, just for a while. Wu Yuan laughed but said nothing. In fact, she did not scream again. The pain had forced her to roll silently on the ground, but she was not going to ask for his help anymore. Read the next chapter on our VIP novel. Gu Shijio did not find any joy in her misery. She wanted to give Wu Yuan the relief she sought, but she was helpless. The wizardry barrier that Fan Qianshi had set up was too great. She could not break it. Time seemed to pass very slowly. However, it was clear that Fan Qianshi that diverted his attention away from Wu Yuan and was focused on maneuvering his ship. Nonetheless, there was something wrong with the warship. It was as if something had caught it and prevented it from moving forward. This realization infuriated the man. He kept toying with the joystick on the control panel, but nothing seemed to work. In seconds, he seemed to have snapped the joystick. Damn. He cursed and looked back at Wu Wuyan. Wu Wuyan stood up with her huge stomach. Her hands and feet began to twitch. The evil child's face on her stomach began to grow nearer to her face slowly. Its teeth were also more prominent. Fan Qianshi was relieved by this sight. He understood that once this child's face covered Wu Wuyan's face, he would suck her soul from her mouth and then swallow it. After that, her misery would come to an abrupt end. The child fetus would be formed, and he would become his most potent assistant to complete his mission. Boom. A loud noise was heard, as a hole emerged on the ship. The material used to make this ship was harder than diamond, so it must have been a mighty force. A purple figure suddenly appeared in the cabin. He waved his sleeves, and a colorful light that was similar to an upside-down rainbow was fired toward Wu Wuyan. Everything happened too quickly, so Fan Qianshi did not have time to assess the situation. By the time he was ready to respond, it was already too late. The majestic colorful light had covered Wu Wuyan entirely. There was a sharp and shrilling scream in the air for a second, which could numb anyone's ears. Fortunately, it was only a second, before the colorful light suddenly twisted around her to end the sharp cry. When the colorful light disappeared, Wu Wuyan and the child fetus also disappeared. Fan Qianshi's plan had failed. His face turned pale instantly, and he suddenly rushed to Gu Shijiu. Apparently, he wanted to catch her to be his hostage. However, he only caught air because Gu Shijiu had teleported away. No one needed to guess where she ended up next, which was right beside the man in purple. In fact, she almost plunged into his arms. Fuyi. The man's familiar fragrance lingered around her nose, almost reducing her to tears. Meanwhile, the man hugged her with one of his arms and used his other hand to fire an attack at Fan Qianshi. You can go to hell. Chapter 2708. A family of three. The colorful ray surged and flashed as it dynamited toward Fan Qianshi like a thunderbolt. Within seconds, it enveloped the man's body entirely. However, instead of shrieks of pain, Fan Qianshi merely laughed. Later, a bright blue light seemed to enter the spaceship and took the man with it. He instantly disappeared from the damaged ship. In an unlikely turn of events, Fan Qianshi fled the scene. He did not even have a conversation with Di Fuyi before leaving. Initially, Gu Shijiu expected a fierce battle between Di Fuyi and the man. Perhaps it would be the most intense fight she had ever seen. It was an event that Gu Shijiu personally looked forward to as well, since she had intentions to slice the man into bits. Based on his skills and abilities, he should be able to deal with the two of them. It would not be an unfair fight for him. So why did he run away so quickly? While still deep in her contemplations, Gu Shijiu did not realize that she and Di Fuyi were no longer in the spaceship. Fortunately, the two of them left the ship in time, as it seemed to have activated a self-destruct mode, which resulted in a giant firework being set off in space. It was actually a magnificent view. Di Fuyi's hand was carrying her in his arm, and she subconsciously grabbed his sleeve like old times. Blessed with the abilities of a god, they did not need to breathe, so it was okay for them to float around in space. The cold was bearable too. Should we chase after him? Gu Shijiu hurriedly asked. No. Di Fuyi shook his head slightly. We can't catch him. Gu Shijiu looked around to see if she could find any trace of the direction in which the man traveled, but could not find anything. It seemed that this guy could travel faster than a battleship. This oddity begged Gu Shijiu to ponder why he used the ship in the first place. For the sake of the child fetus. The quality of the clone body was too low to keep it alive in space. Di Fuyi answered her question in her head, and then briefly told her about the child fetus. A cold sweat broke out over Gu Zijia's forehead. She was pleasantly surprised that the body that Wu Wuyan's soul had occupied was only a clone. However, it was frightening to learn that her belly seemed to house a monster that could destroy the world. No wonder it looked so strange. The inhabitants of the world were genuinely fortunate that Di Fuyi arrived on time. Otherwise, that evil child would have been born. Perhaps, the primary victim in all of this was Wu Wuyan. Thinking of her spurred Gu Shijiu to tug on Di Fuyi's sleeves again. Did you destroy Wu Wuyan's soul earlier? Fui looked at her little hand that was holding his sleeve and shook his head slightly. I only intended to destroy the child fetus. Was it Wu Yuan's soul that was inside the clone body? He could still remember that woman. Gu Shizhou nodded. Yes, it was her. While she answered, Gu Shizhou had already cast a spell to gather the pieces of her soul. Fui's eyes flashed slightly, but he did not intervene. He chose to watch her. After a moment, Gu Shizhou stopped and frowned. Her soul has disappeared. Would it have dissipated faster since we are in space? Or was she brought away by Fan Qianshi again? To satisfy their curiosity, Fui also cast a spell in an attempt to collect the pieces of her soul. You don't have to search for her soul anymore. It is with Fan Qianshi. Gu Shizhou was furious just by the thought of that. That bastard. I will not let him go. Fui hugged her in his arms and calmly said, His name is Fan Qianshi? Who is he? He is. Chapter 2709. A Family of 3-2. Just when Gu Shizhou was about to tell Fui of his origin, the firmament stone on her wrist quickly sent her directed audio message. Master, you cannot tell him. Gu Shizhou was startled by the firmament stone, but she also understood the consequences that could lie ahead if she were to spill another secret. Swiftly, she thought of something else to say and replied. He is a bastard who is more powerful than a great deity. Fui stared at the firmament stone, for he could tell that something was not right. In fear of being bullied by Fui, it stayed idle. Did the heavenly law somehow protect Fan Qianshi's identity? Why would the firmament stone stop Gu Shizhou from telling him about their common enemy? After all, Fui had been the lord for 1,000 years. No one knew better than him about the consequences of breaking a heavenly law. Once a secret is spilled, disaster was bound to strike. But at the same time, what could be more powerful than a great deity? Was the man the master of heavenly laws? It seemed impossible. Shen Juli used to tell him about the master of the heavenly law. It was said that this person lived outside the 6 realms. He was in charge of the rise and fall of the world, and would formulate the rules in the world to ensure its continued existence. He was strict but fair and did not allow for any biases. He was not even allowed to experience lust. How could such a god use evil tricks like the mother and child venom to harm people? But at the same time, the manner in which Fan Qianshi fled clearly showed that he was extraordinarily skillful. If Fui fought with him alone, he might not even be considered his opponent. Everything happened so quickly that Fui did not even have enough time to observe his appearance. The man was so mysterious that Fui could not even guess his intentions. Nonetheless, as long as Gu Shizhou returned to his side safely, everything else did not matter. He would do whatever he could when the time came. Watching Fui contemplate the possible identity of the man, had Gu Shizhou feeling rather miserable since she could not tell him the truth. However, his warm embrace helped her feel more at ease, even though she simply could not believe that he found her. His timing was impeccable. I thought you would only be back after. I didn't expect you to come so soon. Did I come back too early? Fui tried to lighten the mood. Of course not. I wished you could have come back sooner. Gu Shizhou quickly turned things around. Did you miss me? Of course I did. However, it is useless to miss you. Gu Zijia's tone after her last remark was a little bit sad. She was too busy these days and deliberately did not want to think about him. The thought of missing was too hurtful, and she was trying to dispose of it. How could it be useless? If you had spent more time thinking about me, maybe I could have come back to you earlier. Fui raised his hand and picked up her chin. He then gently kissed her on her lips. I wondered if you had forgotten about me again. Gu Shizhou was speechless. What theory was that? She looked up at him and asked for a sincere explanation. Fui looked at her bright eyes and smiled lazily. I will tell you later. There is a more important thing to do now. What is that? Gu Shizhou did not quite finish her question as Fui covered her mouth. He hugged her tightly and moved his body closer to hers. In the next second, he was kissing her with his warm lips all over her body. His movements were intense, perhaps even overbearing at times, like a man with a deep thirst. He was like a storm that swept through her whole body. Just from his actions alone, Gu Shijie knew that she no longer needed to ask her question from before. She closed her eyes to enhance her skin's receptors and tried to feel every warm kiss he gave her. She definitely enjoyed it. These days she had been missing him like crazy. Guan Yanning stood in front of the console and tried to look away. He was stunned by what had happened right in front of his eyes. Chapter 27:10. A family of 3-3. Guan Yanning was familiar with the sturdiness of the marshal's warship. In fact, he knew that better than anyone else. He used to think that nothing was strong enough to destroy it. According to Duan Mayan, it was a gift from the heaven and the earth and contained the power of the sun and the moon. He never expected to see the warship disintegrated so easily and quickly. In fact, he just could not believe it to the point where his mouth was left ajar. Little Dihao was still next to him. The kid smiled and cheered. Success. Ah. Guan Yanning looked back at the place where he last saw Duan Mayan's spaceship and widened his eyes but could not see anything. Are you saying that your father was successful? Why don't I see him? If you can see them, then perhaps there is something wrong. Dihao chuckled. His father had set up a wizardry barrier that could conceal his actions. Even though Dihao was familiar with this type of barrier, he could only see the shadows of his parents flashing around and nothing else. Poor Guan Yanning was confused, and no one was there to explain what was happening to him. After pondering about the situation a little longer, he asked, "What about Duan Mayan?" Although he was mad, he still cared about his buddy. After all, they had been fighting together for so many years. Duan Mayan died more than 2 months ago. Dihao's tone was firm. You don't have to think about him anymore. My sincere condolences to you. Guan Yanning was stunned. I heard that if one's body is possessed, their original soul will not die but will be squeezed into a corner of their body. Since such a powerful person possessed him, do you think he will still have a space for his soul inside his body? The fact that this marshal had all of Duan Mayan's memories proves that his soul had been swallowed up by him. There is no chance for him to be still alive. What about his body? Guan Yanning could not help but inquire. His body was there in the battleship. However, if I am not mistaken, it should have disintegrated along with the battleship. Guan Yanning could not believe it. Little guy, you were not there. How can you be sure? Infuriated, Dihao chose to ignore him. Meanwhile, the general looked into the distance and felt a sense of sorrow creeping in on him. His marshal was dead, and the 2 lords had returned. Did they still have to stay on this continent? He knew that he needed to return to the Starry Crescent land and get his people out. Otherwise, the whole army would be annihilated. Do you regret coming here? Dihao's question caused a stir in his stomach. The little kid could accurately guess his thoughts. Guan Yanning looked at the console in front of him and wondered when he could turn back. He could not see either of the lords, so he was not even sure if he needed to wait for them. If he turned the ship around, would he face the same fate as the marshal? The lord would not do that, right? After all, this little guy was still on board. Even a fierce tiger would not kill its son. Perhaps he could take this little guy away as a hostage. When he returned to the Starry Crescent land, he would negotiate terms with the 2 lords to spare his life and his people. Guan Yanning no longer had the intention to rule the continent. He just wanted to bring his people home. Needless to say, that would be a challenging task given his circumstances. After all, they had done a lot of bad things to rule this continent. They took out all people in the Starry Crescent land. Revenge was all but a certainty. The thought made the vein on Guan Yanning's forehead twitch rigorously. He glanced at Dihao, who was at his side, and tried to assess his chances. This little guy was so tender and small that he could probably hurt him with one finger. Chapter 27:11. A family of 3-4. Are you planning to take me as your hostage? Do you plan to use me as leverage to negotiate with my father so that he would let you and your people go? Dihao's big eyes sparkled at him. Guan Yanning was rendered speechless. This little kid could see right through him. Swiftly, he moved his hand to reach for the weapon at his waist, but it was missing. The gun that he had hidden there had disappeared. Looking for this? A silver gun was spinning in Dihao's little hand. How could this be? Guan Yining was truly dumbstruck by the turn of events. He was already considered one of the most skilled people from his clan. Yet he did not even notice when the little kid had stolen his gun. Di Hao sighed. If I were you, I would not act rashly. Otherwise you would wish for death. Next, Di Hao handed the gun to Lu Wu, who chewed it in its mouth. Although the general was brave, he did not want to act rashly in a disadvantageous situation. He was not confident of defeating the little guy in front of him, along with the weird beast that he rode. After taking a deep breath, he decided to deny the child's foresight with a thick face. Kid, you have overthought. Anyway, should we go over and get the Lord? No. Di Hao supported his chin with his fist. We will wait here. They will come back soon. Although he was fairly certain that his father would return, he could not believe that the man had left him behind twice in quick succession. Fortunately, it did not take long for Fuyi to return this time. After Di Hao waited patiently for about 15 minutes, Fuyi finally teleported back into the ship with his mother. Excited by his mother's return, Di Hao flew at her like a small and tender cannonball. Mother! He missed her dearly. These days he had been very worried about her. He was afraid that Fan Qianshi would have already captured her by the time he and Fuyi arrived back on Earth. Gu Zijia's eyes brightened at the sight of Di Hao charging toward her. Fuyi had told her that there was a small surprise waiting for her, and asked her to teleport them back quickly. Even though he had given her a clear hint, she had not expected to see little Di Hao here on the ship. Seeing him flying toward her, she raised her hand to catch him. However, she did not foresee that Fuyi would grab him by his vest and lift him toward her. Stupid! Your mother is pregnant. Why are you acting so rashly? Di Hao rolled his eyes. He was not going to hurt her, obviously. Although he appeared to be rushing over, he knew how to hold back his strength. He immediately looked up at Gu Shijio and spoke, Mother! Gu Shijio looked at his pitiful face, and her heart melted. She carried him into her arms and hugged him tightly. Di Hao, you are gaining weight and growing taller. When she left the Shura world, this kid was only a year old. Even though it had not been a long time, he looked as though he was at least 2 years old now. Distracted by the little boy, she had not realized the other being in the room. Suddenly, something was pulling at the end of her clothes. She looked down and saw that Lu Wu was pulling her clothes with its mouth and trying to get her attention. Gu Shijio was overjoyed. It was such a rush as she did not expect to see the two of them and Fuyi. She raised her hand and patted its fur. It's good to see you again. Where is the muscle? The muscle was sent back to Tianju Hall. I'm sure it is waiting for you to go back now. Fuyi informed her as he raised his hand and wrapped it around her waist. Gu Shijio suddenly felt eager to return to the starry crescent land. What are we waiting for? Let's go back. She swept her eyes across the cabin and saw Guan Yining standing nearby. It would seem that some of her happiness had diminished as she did not quite like Guan Yining. After all, this fellow was also one of the culprits behind this mess. Her glare was enough to scare the general to the point where his scalp went numb. He stood there and smiled to try to reduce the tension in the room. My lords, are we going back now? Why is he here? Gu Shijio did not buy it. Fuyi answered. I needed him for a temporary assignment. Fortunately, he was able to drive this ship so that we could catch up to you. Otherwise, he would not have arrived in time to stop Fan Qianshi. That was certainly a significant contribution, for they could not even imagine the consequences that would befall the world if Fuyi had arrived slightly later. Chapter 27:12. Fuyu's requirement. Gu Shijio stopped hinting why she did not want the man to be on the ship. Meanwhile, Guan Yining sighed as he understood the situation surrounding his comrade. He still insisted in finding out the marshal's whereabouts. Fuyi could very easily tell that Fan Qianshi had possessed Duan Mayan's mortal body. However, it was safe to assume that Duan Mayan himself was already dead. He is gone. Guan Yining's face turned pale at once. Who did this to him? Where did the person go? I shall do whatever I can to avenge his death, he said determinedly. Fuyi threw him a quick glance and answered sarcastically. You are not even capable of getting close to him. Don't make a promise that you cannot keep. Even then, Guan Yining was not ready to give up without trying. Before he said anything more, Fuyi added, "However, you do have a way to help us get revenge. Tell me everything about where you have been in recent years. Also, I need to know how your general has been acting lately." He who had a thorough knowledge of the enemy was bound to win in a battle. Fuyi surely needed to find out more about the enemy, especially since Fan Qianshi had been manipulating the situation in the dark. There must be reasons behind the invasion from the people of Blue Fox Planet. Perhaps, Fan Qianshi might have stirred up the idea and edged them on for the galactic invasion. It was likely that he could find out more about Fan Qianshi's intentions from the invaders of the Starry Crescent land. Guan Yining agreed to share what he knew. "I can tell you everything that you want to know in exchange for the safety of my men. I want them to leave in peace." Scornfully, Gu Shizhou refused to take the offer. "You have almost driven the entire Starry Crescent land into extinction with so many innocent lives lost in the bloody hands of your men. How dare you offer us the information in exchange for the safety of these murderers? Do you think this feud is going to end the easy way?" Guan Yining stubbornly replied, "If you are not going to let them go, I will not tell you a thing." Gu Shizhou gently tapped the table with her fingers while threatening him. "Actually, we can easily find someone else for information. There are so many people from the Blue Fox Planet down there. If I threaten them enough, I will surely get what I need." Guan Yining felt immediately threatened by the Lord. "What they know may not be as much as what I do. After all, I am the one who has spent the longest time with the Marshal, so I know more than anyone else. I can save you from going down a winding road." Gu Shizhou laughed out loud. "Are you trying to say that you are the only person we can rely on?" Guan Yining confidently replied, "Yes, they do not know quite as much as I do. Tell me everything, and I shall allow you to have your ship and leave in peace. Your life will be spared." "No," Guan Yining exclaimed. "I will either leave with my men or not at all." He quickly refused the offer without any hesitation. Gu Shizhou stood up and said, "There is no point in this discussion anymore." She clenched her fists while looking around the cabin. "I do not think your presence will do any good here. I shall end your life here so you and your marshal can die in the exact same place." She looked like she was going to blow up the entire ship. Panicked, Guan Yining immediately added, "We are now moving through space. Both of you are supreme beings, so you can still live devoid of air. However, the little boy may not be able to survive. Once the ship is broken, he will surely get hurt." His remark caught Fuyu's attention. "We can try and see," he smilingly said. He curled his fingers and started reciting a spell to draw his spiritual power to his palm. A streak of 7 colored rays could be seen increasing in brightness in his hand. Ashen, Guan Yining was well aware of the power of Fuyu's kung fu. With a simple gesture at his fingertip, he was able to move an entire meteorite in space. That simply showed how easy it was for him to destroy the ship. Guan Yining heaved a deep sigh, and finally gave up. Swiftly he kneeled on the floor and said, "My lords, I know my mistake. Please give me a chance." Chapter 27:13. Fuyu's Requirement 2. The entire idea of the invasion was from the Marshal and I. Our men were only carrying out their duties under our command. You should put all the blame on me. Can I offer a counter-proposal? I will tell you every secret that you want to know in exchange for their lives to be spared. As the chief offender, I shall stay behind for any sort of punishment that you have for me. How about that?" Gu Shizhou certainly did not expect that he would be so loyal to his men. All of a sudden, the hatred that she had for him was reduced by a little. "Your second chance depends on your performance." With a nod, Guan Yining's eyes shone with delight. "Great. What can I do?" "First, tell me everything that you know." Guan Yining hesitated. If he told them every secret that he knew, there would be nothing left for him to bargain with. Fuyi seemed to understand his concern. "You can choose to trust us or have death befall your men. In fact, there is still hope for you if you cooperate fully. I shall decide the fate of your men based on the significance of the information that you choose to share. If it is of utmost importance, I will spare 100 lives. For every piece of general information, I will spare 10. If it is something trivial, only one life will be spared. At this point, there really was nothing Guan Yining could do, except to tell the truth. Many secrets were unfolded. For example, the practice of primary and secondary black magic started about 10,000 years ago by the royal family of the Blue Fox planet. Back then, a celestial master showed up just when they started mastering the practice of the primary and secondary black magic. The celestial master was competent, so he was assigned to assist the crown prince in governing the country. He performed splendidly. As an ambitious man with a plan, the crown prince was meant to succeed to the throne. However, the emperor went mad one day and thought that the crown prince was going to wrest the power from him. So the crown prince was suddenly convicted of treason and was sentenced to death. The crown prince had no choice but to leave the Blue Fox planet in search of somewhere safe. It was where the history of the Blue Fox family in Starry Crescent Land began. The invaders used to be a group of happy thieves on the Blue Fox planet, wandering in the vast universe with no rules and restrictions. One day, the Marshal and Guan Yining both shared the same dream where God bestowed a treasure into their eager hands. They were told that in a faraway land named the Starry Crescent Land was a magical stone known as the Starry Stone. They could harvest its immense energy and even become immortals by wearing the stone. They talked about the dream the next day and were surprised by their same encounter. Since then, both of them were motivated to get the stone. They did not really care about acquiring energy, but they wanted to live forever. Therefore, they began looking for the Starry Crescent Land based on the hints that God had left behind in their dreams. Very soon, they were able to locate a specific source of energy that was released by the Blue Fox family from afar. Thence the invasion happened. Unfortunately, they did not manage to find the so-called Starry Stone. Instead, they were attracted by the otherworldly cultures of the Starry Crescent Land. They wanted to rule the land by right of conquest so that they could build their homes here. Fuyi listened quietly with occasional but important questions, and Guan Yining answered with everything that he knew. When the whole story was finally done, Fuyi rose and grasped Gu Shijiu by the wrist. "We should go and have a rest." Guan Yining was still worried. "My lords, I have told you everything that I know. How many lives will you spare?" he anxiously asked. Fuyi answered without even looking back, "All of them." Guan Yining gasped in disbelief. "All?" Chapter 27:14, Fuy's Requirement 3. That is correct. Fuyi then took Gu Shijiu away into another cabin where they could have a rest. He was exhausted after such an eventful day, not to mention that he had been traveling for some time to get here. Also, he needed a private space to connect all of the hints and dots. Frozen, Guan Yining stood silently, unable to believe what he had just heard. "Hey, my young lord. Does your father always mean what he says?" he asked Hao for reassurance. Certainly, his word is as good as a bond. The positive statement was what Guan Yining needed. He heaved a long sigh of relief before starting to question the validity of what he heard again. He then circled the room a few times before tripping himself up. "Have you lost your mind? I am dizzy just looking at you." Guan Yining sighed. "All right, I will stop circling the room. We should head back now." "Right now? My young lord. Would you like to rest as well? A child should not stay up too late." Hao shook his finger in disapproval. "I am not tired, so I will stay here and enjoy the view. By the way, call me Mr. Hao and stop addressing me as a young lord." Guan Yining dared not argue with him. The view of the night sky was absolutely breathtaking in space. Guan Yining could not help but share with Hao everything about the constellations while slowly steered across the void. "Stop talking and let me have a moment of silence." Hao did not appreciate the sharing session very much. Understandably, Guan Yining stopped talking. He would peek at Hao every once in a while. The boy was still sitting by the window and gazing intensely at the stars. He seemed to be deeply absorbed in his own thoughts. Sometimes, the boy could be seen using his fingers underneath the sleeves to make some predictions. The little boy did not seem so little anymore. In fact, he glowed with a vibrant state of power and authority. He was only a child, but his powerful aura was not to be underestimated. He was just like a god who was overseeing the world. Guan Yining was intimidated by the boy. But Dihao did not care about Guan Yanning at all, and continued to observe the stars. He frowned a little. Many things had changed, but the ending still remained the same. His memories were still the same. He could not hold back a sigh of disappointment. His mission was not accomplished yet. Perhaps he still had a long way to go. His time-traveling experience was an accident, but he intended to make it count. The distance did not matter at first when they were in pursuit of the man. However, the return journey finally made Guan Yanning realize how far they had actually gone. Even with such great speed, they would still need at least half a day to get back to Starry Crescent Land. When the last lapse was complete, he finally saw Starry Crescent Land from a distance. Relieved, he then decided to speed up, but was halted by a sudden flash of blue light before his eyes. Something was about to collide with the ship. Guan Yanning was shocked by the sudden obstruction. By the time he realized it, the object was already very close. He quickly steered the ship away with a sharp turn, and just managed to avoid the blue light. Stunned, Guan Yanning quickly wanted to check what he had narrowly missed. He was even more shocked when he found out that it was actually a bird. The giant bird was massive enough to blot out the sky and the sun just by extending its wings. As the bird had stopped very close to the ship, Guan Yanning was only able to see its head, which was already as huge as a small hill. Frankly, its eye alone was already the size of an elephant. The bird was also looking at him intensely. He could not help but be astonished. What kind of bird could that be? Even without its gigantic beak, the bird could still easily crush the ship just by blinking. Guan Yanning wanted to steer the ship away from the potential danger, but he froze in a blind panic. All of a sudden, Dihao quickly stood up and waved at the bird. "Hey, what took you so long?" Chapter 27:15. The compensation that Fuyi asked for the bird gave him a wink and started talking in a human voice. "Little Dihao, I did not expect to see you here. Why are you inside this metal cage? It looks so weird." The bird's voice sounded surprisingly melodious. Guan Yanning was astonished. His metal ship was not weird at all. In fact, it was the bird that was the weird creature around here. He had never seen a bird this size. Moreover, one that could also talk. Guan Yanning tried very hard to see what was behind the bird, but its gigantic size blocked his sight. Dihao waved at the bird again and said, "You may all come in." Guan Yanning was beyond shocked. The bird was obviously bigger than his ship. How was it going to fit in? Great! The bird swiftly agreed before Guan Yanning even said anything. A blinding light flashed before his eyes, and the bird disappeared entirely. Surprisingly, 6 more visitors showed up in front of the ship. There were 2 women and 4 men, all equally young. They looked and dressed very differently. One of them was wearing a set of long robes that was sky blue. The look in his eyes clearly showed how good he felt about his handsome self. "Open the door. Let us in," he said while knocking on the glass. It was the voice of the bird. Guan Yanning was dumbstruck. He tried to maintain his composure as he opened the door for them. In another cabin, Fuyi was trying to get a short nap while holding Gu Shijio in his arms. Gu Shijio was quite unsettled, so she was not ready to join him. Nonetheless, Fuyi dragged her straight to the bed without listening to her explanations. He even took off her shoes. "Listen to me. Lie down with me for a while." Overwhelmed by the joy of their reunion, Gu Shijio could not find the heart to reject him. Hence she obliged. Fuyi crawled up next to her and gently hugged her in his arms. Ever since he recovered his memory, they had not been able to spend time together. At this very moment, Gu Shijio was completely in his embrace, overwhelmed by the familiar scent that she had been longing for. He was still the same strong and handsome man that she loved. Her heart was thumping fast just being close to him. She could feel how desperate he was for her the moment they kissed. She knew how much he wanted her. Fortunately, the cabin was completely sealed and private. Fuyi filled the space with a bed and a mattress that he had prepared himself. Everything he needed for a romantic night was ready, so Gu Shijio assumed that there was no way he would let her escape this time. She tried to examine her own pulse just to be safe. As the product of a union between a god and a goddess, perhaps the baby would be born with supreme qualities that escalated her growth. Gu Shijie felt like she was already 3 months pregnant by now. After the first trimester, it was safe for a pregnant woman to have sex. If she was careful enough, she should be able to satisfy his physical needs. Frankly, she never expected that they would be reunited so soon. Her entire heart was filled with joy. Therefore, there was nothing she would not do to make him happy. She would surely make love to him if he asked her to. To her surprise, all he wanted was to examine her pulse to make sure that she was doing fine. "Let's sleep," he said while planting a soft kiss on her forehead. He then closed his eyes and fell into a deep sleep. Gu Shijie was surprised. She realized she was not sleepy yet, so she turned around and watched him sleep instead. He was sleeping soundly and hardly moved. His curled and long eyelashes immediately caught her attention. She then slowly traced it down to his crimson lips. Surprisingly, there were dark circles around his eyes. She gasped. Chapter 27:16. The compensation that Fuyi asked for. 2. When did he last sleep? How did he get so tired? As a great deity, he was equipped with the physique of a supreme being, which should have provided him with enough energy to go sleepless for 10 days. However, from the look of his exhausted face, he must have worked a lot in order to get back to her as soon as possible. She felt so loved by his heartwarming gesture. At the same time, she also felt uneasy about putting her head on his arm for so long. She was worried that his arm might go numb, so she moved her head away slightly. Unsurprisingly, as soon as she lifted her head, his other arm immediately cuddled her and pulled her even closer to him. Gu Shijie looked up and saw that he still had his eyes closed. His steady breathing clearly showed that he was still in a deep sleep. Apparently, his reaction to her lifting her head off his arm was all a reflex action that he had developed over time. Even in his sleep, he did not want her to leave. There was a mixture of emotions in her heart as she was equally touched and saddened by his insecurity. With a sigh, she decided to stay put. However, she tried her best to reduce the pressure on his arm, so that he could sleep more comfortably. Gu Shijie was tired too, but the excitement of their reunion kept her awake. She did not want to waste their time together, being asleep. She would rather watch him. Fuyi did not sleep for long. He was up in about an hour. Right when he opened his eyes, their eyes were immediately locked with one another. He saw her intense gaze that had never left his face. "Are you awake?" she asked joyfully. "Didn't you sleep?" "I am not sleepy." "So you have been watching me sleep the whole time?" "Stop bragging. I only started watching you right before you woke up." "Stubborn girl," Fuyi teased. He could not help but pinch her cheek and pulled her even tighter into his arms. He could finally heave a long sigh of relief. "Honestly, when did you last sleep?" Gu Shijie turned herself around and laid her body flat on his body. Her gaze was still locked on his eyes. Fuyi shifted his body a little and pulled her away. "Try not to lie on your body. The baby might get hurt," he said while putting her down by his side. He had a point. Gu Shijie did as told. "You have not answered my question yet," she insisted. Fuyi slowly caressed her hair. "For the whole time that you were away?" Gu Shijie was speechless. It had been a month since they last saw each other. That explained why he was so tired. "Tell me how you got back here," Gu Shijie said while holding his hand that was on her hair. The look in Fuyi's eyes darkened. Apparently, what he had been through was not quite pleasant for him to recall. It had been a tough journey. He used Yin Yanli's method and finally escaped from the Shura world to the upper bound. Tirelessly, he went searching everywhere, but no one had even heard of her. Fuyi knew that the first thing that Gu Shijie would do once she was in the upper bound was to find Bai Zhe and her majestic beings. Perhaps she would go and visit Long Sai too. However, it became clear to him that she had not met any of them yet. There were only 2 possible reasons. The first being that she had not returned to the upper bound at all, or the second, she was severely injured on her way back and resting somewhere. He had to send out every single one of his men to search for her. He even used every spell to trace her scent, only to find that she had not returned to the upper bound at all. She was originally from Starry Crescent Land, so that was the only place that Fuyi could think of. However, the pathway between the upper bound and Starry Crescent Land was no longer available. He had to pave his own way to her. He was very worried for her safety, so there was no time to waste. He spent every minute trying to find a way to get to her. He even asked Di Hao for his input, and thought that the boy who came from the future might have some clues, but the boy was just as helpless as him. Chapter 27:17. The compensation that Di Fuyi asked for. 3. The changes in events since Di Hao's arrival would surely have altered the upcoming scheduled events that Di Hao had personally experienced. In fact, Gu Shijiu being taken away from the Shiro world came as a surprise to Di Hao. At that point, Di Fuyi knew that he had no one to count on but himself. He spent a lot of time looking around without finding a single clue. But one day he heard Gu Zijia's voice echo in the air. "Fuyi, I miss you." He heard her voice wafting through the breeze. It was a surreal encounter because it felt so real even though Gu Shijiu was not around. It was so subtle that he would have missed her voice if he had not paid enough attention. Di Fuyi quickly looked around for her, but found nothing. He concluded that it was her inner voice that had called out to him. Once again, Di Fuyi found himself on the rotary platform. There were millions of possible outcomes to different lower bounds, with only one of them being the starry crescent land. He would not simply take a leap of faith, for he was not sure where he would end up. Fortunately, he was able to hear her thoughts. The more she thought about him, the better it would be for him to locate her through array formations. Needless to say, a great amount of spiritual energy was required to create the array formation. It took even more effort to support the formation and keep it open since Di Fuyi was worried that he might have mistaken her location. He decided to keep the portal open until he could hear her voice again and locate her once again. In the end, he spent almost a month at the rotary platform. Even Bai Zhe and Kuan Shui both felt that what he did was foolish because there was no guarantee that he would hear her voice again. However, right before despair swallowed him whole, her voice came through the air once more. He quickly searched for her and marked down her location. Without wasting any time, he took the boy, who had been by his side all the while, and jumped across the rotary platform together with him. Fortunately, he returned to Starry Crescent Land once more. There was no time for him to catch his breath. He needed a plan so that he could be reunited with his wife as soon as possible. However, when he learned about the current date in the Starry Crescent Land from a stranger, Di Hao took a surprising turn and became concerned about Yan Chen and Little Fox. The following was another series of unexpected events that kept him without any sleep. Fortunately, he was tough enough to go through all the obstacles at once. Di Fuyi only shared about his experiences briefly, but his story was enough to charm Gu Shijiu. She was touched by how much he was willing to do for her. She snuggled her head in his arms at that point and looked very pleased. Nonetheless, Di Fuyi squinted his eyes in disapproval at her and said, "It had been such a long time that we were apart, and yet you have only thought about me twice." At one point during his long wait, he was quite convinced that she had lost her memory again and forgotten about him. Impossible. She defended herself. "I thought about you every day. I just never showed it. I only heard your inner voice twice," Di Fuyi teased in a flirtatious manner. "Perhaps you are not that into me after all." Gu Shijiu did not see that coming. His last remark rather hurt her, as it made it seem that he was unaware of her feelings for him. She was just too busy to announce how much she missed him publicly. She knew that they would not be able to meet anytime soon. So she decided to keep her thoughts to herself. It was only when she was alone and vulnerable that she would express her longing for him. After trying to recall everything, it seemed like she had truly only mentioned his name twice. But to be fair to her, she did not know that he was able to hear her inner voice. Otherwise, she would have done it every day. She explained all this to Di Fuyi to try to make sure he knew what had really happened. Given this strange connection that the two had, Gu Shijiu predicted that if she had thought of him long enough while she was in Tianju Hall, which was where Di Fuyi used to stay, there was a chance that she could develop some psychic powers that would somehow connect their hearts and minds together. While that idea would certainly be amazing, Di Fuyi did not intend to let her off the hook so easily. "I think I need some compensation from you." "How should I compensate you for what had happened?" Gu Shijiu was willing to offer him anything that he wanted. "Think about it yourself." Fuyi then hugged her while waiting for an answer. There he goes, she thought to herself. The man was going to ask for the compensation that he thought he deserved. Chapter 27:18. The compensation that Fuyi asked for. What should she offer to him? With a quick thought, she came up with an idea. I shall return the status of lord to you. Fuyi did not buy the idea at all. Think of something better. Fame and gain were as worthless as manure to him. He never cared about having a title. Then, should I get you a beautiful lady to serve you better? Gu Shijio blinked her eyes in excitement as she teased him. Fuyi could tell that she was teasing him. He raised her chin with his hand and looked at her with a cocky smile. I will not accept anyone besides you, my beautiful lady. Gu Shijio cuddled his arm and openly asked, Do you want me? Honestly, Fuyi did not know how to answer her question. He wanted her, but he also needed to consider his child's safety. Therefore, it would be better if he abstained for now. However, he would still need to be compensated in the future for his efforts. Upon deciding what to do, he pulled himself slightly closer to her and said, Little pervert, you need to learn to be more cautious. We still have plenty of time together in the future. There is no need for us to do this now. She thought that he wanted her to satisfy him, so she was willing to do it. But once she heard his explanation, she drew even closer to him and smiled. She finally understood his request and was about to kiss him. Satisfied, Fuyi closed his eyes while waiting for her lips to touch his lips. However, she abruptly stopped moving forward when she was about an inch away from his lips. Things took a swift turn as she lifted her head slightly upward and planted a soft kiss on his eye instead. How about that? Fuyi opened his eyes only to see her flirtatious smile. She obviously did that on purpose. He returned her gesture with a smile and pointed his finger at his lips. Give me something better. Gu Shijio smiled seductively and said, I see. So you want me to kiss you? You should have told me that earlier. How would I know if you never told me? She proceeded to recite a few passages by Bonze Tang to the point where Fuyi could no longer listen to any of it, and decided to stop her from talking by occupying her lips with his lips. A long and passionate exchange of kisses left them both breathless. Both of them were sexually aroused and could not wait to get even more passionate with one another. However, they needed to wait for the sake of the baby. The room was so quiet that only their panting could be heard. At that moment, Gu Shijio thought to herself that the sense of tranquility is where all sexual interactions begin. So in order to suppress their desires, Gu Shijio decided to change the mood. Fuyi, the people of Blue Fox Planet have been ravaging the Starry Crescent land. Many innocent lives were lost. Should we really let them all go? She was not a saint, so there was no way she could tolerate their sins with forgiveness. She was unwilling to let them all go scot-free. Fuyi sighed. Shijio, I did not show my mercy blindly to them. These people should not stay any longer, or else things might change for the worse. Fuyi explained in more detail. The Starry Crescent land used to be immune to all invasions, not because of sheer luck, but because of a natural wizardry barrier that could keep out all invaders. Therefore, the people of the Starry Crescent land could live peacefully. However, there are two conditions to sustain the wizardry barrier. Firstly, it has to be maintained by the Lord. Secondly, no outsiders are allowed to be in Starry Crescent land. About a year ago, there was a huge crack in the wizardry barrier, thus releasing the signals that the Blue Fox family had been trying to transmit to space. In order to fix the crack, we need to either kill them or send them all away. She never knew about that, but some of it did not make any sense to her. That does not sound right. You said that no outsiders are allowed in the Starry Crescent land, but the Blue Fox family is not one of us, right? The Blue Fox family first arrived about 10,000 years ago. During that, the wizardry barrier had not come into existence yet. Moreover, the people from the Blue Fox family had adjusted their physique to be more compatible with the qualities of the land that they had just moved in. Therefore, the wizardry barrier did not keep them out. When was the wizardry barrier first established? Not long after I came into existence. Was it there because of you? It could be. Fuyi only speculated that to be the case with this information. Gu Shizhou realized that she could not possibly punish them here. I still think that we are letting them go far too easily. Silly, do you think that they can all survive? Di Fui laughed. Ah, I bet there are not many of them left now, Di Fui continued. Meanwhile, Gu Shizhou was not able to follow his train of thought. Chapter 27:19. Insecure about losses and gains. Before I went after Fan Qianshi, I destroyed the entire wizardry barrier around their base. Then I destroyed all of their battleships. Right after that, I told Mu Feng and the rest of the team that it was time for them to fight back. That was about a day ago. I believe they have conquered the enemy by now. Gu Shizhou heaved a sigh of relief. As usual, the mighty man had everything planned out. Without their battleships, the invaders of the Blue Fox planet were powerless. With that in mind, she could not help but look at Di Fui with admiration. You have never seen the battleships before, have you? How could you destroy the battleships so easily? She thought she was already ahead of the rest, but he was even faster. Di Fui rubbed her hair and replied, "Baby, are you impressed by your husband's capability?" The man was the embodiment of the master of heavenly law. When he recovered all of his memory and power, his level of his kung fu had reached an unfathomable scale. Perhaps, it became instinctive to him how to destroy different objects. Gu Shizhou was certainly relieved. It was great to have him back, just in time to swing things back in their favor. Perhaps, he could inherit all of the mess in the Starry Crescent land from her, so that she could rest. Finally, she began to feel sleepy, knowing that most of their problems had been addressed. Gu Shizhou put her head down onto the pillow and fell asleep right away. "Let me sleep for a bit. Please wake me up when we land." Di Fui knew how tired she must be. "Sure," he reassured while tucking her under the blanket. A brief exchange outside the quiet room suddenly caught Di Fui's attention. Some guests must have arrived on the ship, so he wanted to check out the situation. However, before he left the room, Gu Shizhou suddenly asked, "Mu Feng and the rest of them had no idea that you were resurrected. What was their first reaction when they received your directed audio?" "They did not believe at first, so I scolded them. They sounded beyond joyful. I am not sure if they were crying or laughing. None of their utterances made sense to me." Gu Shizhou asked nothing more. She could already picture their reactions vividly in her head. Soon she fell asleep. Di Fui sat by the bed for a while to examine her pulse before he left the room. It seems that he met some friends. Kuan Shui, Feng Ruhua, and his 4 guardians from the Shura world were all present, including Yin Yanli and the young palace master Mingdai. All of them were here. Kuan Zui's eyes twinkled with delight at the sight of Di Fui. "Master, does this thing belong to Starry Crescent Land? It seems one of a kind." The thing that he was referring to was the battleship. Instead of answering, Di Fui threw a quick glance at Guan Yening. Intimidated, he trembled a little before he weakly said, "This thing belongs to my people. It is not from the Starry Crescent Land." "Are you the invaders?" Kuan Shui stared at him in disbelief. Guan Yening was too scared to deny it. "Yes," he softly admitted. Frustrated, Kuan Shui almost got physical with the man. "How dare you invade the territory of our master?" Guan Yining raised his hands to surrender. "I know my mistake. I will never repeat it." He took a look at Kuan Zui's fist that was already charged with power, and became worried that he might be killed. "The Lord has promised to let us all go, so you'd better not do anything reckless," he quickly added. "Did you find Shizhou?" Yin Yanli finally broke his silence. "Of course. She is having a rest in the cabin." Di Fui did not care to lie. Yin Yanli pinched his lips into a tight line. He knew that her safety was no longer his concern. Therefore he looked away and said nothing more. Multiple tasks kept them all busy for the following days. Chapter 27:20. Insecure about losses and gains, 2. When Di Fui and Gu Shizhou finally returned to the Starry Crescent Land, their presence set the people's hearts ablaze. As for Guan Yening, he realized that everything had changed the moment he returned. Di Fui did not give him a chance to speak to his people. Guan Yening's men watched helplessly as the powerful man took him away. But they did not know what was happening. Everyone just assumed that he would never be back again. When Fuyi had just left, the people from the Blue Fox planet assessed their situation. Their marshal had left them. Their second-in-command was doomed under Fuy's reprimand. At the same time, both of the lords of the Starry Crescent land had returned stronger than ever. These survivors from another planet were powerless to defend themselves. In fact, the odds could not be more against them. Therefore, they decided to run away with the remaining ships that they had. As there were too many of them to cater to, the whole process of fleeing took so long that it provided a perfect window for Mu Feng and his troops to arrive. Only then did they realize that the wizardry barrier that shielded their base had been completely breached. Needless to say, the powerful men of Tianju Hall fought their way right through the door. Although these soldiers of Blue Fox Planet were equipped with the strongest weapons and the most advanced technology, their physical bodies were not able to withstand the spiritual power of their opponents. There was no way they could fight back. The people of Tianju Hall hated these raiders, so they spared no mercy in their attack. After a long battle of blood and fire, the battlefield became a gruesome sight of dead bodies, mostly of the soldiers from the Blue Fox planet. Only a dozen of them ran away in a flurry with their own ship. When Guan Yanning arrived, the base was entirely destroyed. Tons of battleships had been badly damaged while bodies of his men were scattered everywhere lifelessly. He only managed to find a dozen lucky survivors in their toughest fort, their spaceship. The rest were dead. Guan Yanning could not handle the loss and spat a mouth of blood. But there was already nothing he could do to turn the situation around. He could not even blame Fuyi, as all of this happened before Fuyi made the promise. As a marauder, he always knew that one day he would have to pay for his crimes. Since they had slaughtered the people of the Starry Crescent land, it was time for them to pay back for what they had done, blood for blood. Guan Yanning had nothing to say. The Starry Crescent land was no longer the place for them. He gathered everyone across the land. About 50 of them had survived. They left the place in shame and disgrace. As for the people of the Blue Fox family, not many outsiders knew about their origin. Only Yan Chen and the lords knew that the Blue Fox family actually brought these raiders in. Fuyi went straight to Lan Yu to figure out the actual involvement of the Blue Fox family in the invasion. Without any hesitation, Lan Yu told him everything that he needed to know. The ancestors of the Blue Fox family had an ancient belief that their family actually came from another world. Still, no one actually took those words seriously as the story was old. Life went on as usual, until the day when the raiders arrived so suddenly at the base of the Blue Fox family. Luckily, Duan Mayan only took the space as a place for him to gather his troops and never drove the Blue Fox family to extinction. However, Duan Mayan did give Lan Yu options. He could either work closely with his soldiers to build a center for their operation or watch as his people perish. In order to protect his people, he chose the first option and lived on with shame. As the king of the Blue Fox family, Lan Yu was placed in captivity in a secluded end of the fort. Like a puppet, his existence was only used to make his people feel secure, so that these people could maintain the wizardry barrier that shielded the base. Chapter 27-21. Insecure about losses and gains 3. The people of the Blue Fox family were even tasked to build houses and manage the farms for the people of the Blue Fox planet. Basically, all the basic chores were their responsibilities. Although they shared the same origin with these raiders, they were not treated well or given any respect. These people from the Blue Fox planet would often make fun of them by calling them mixed blood. At times, they would get beaten or even killed. The Blue Fox family hated these raiders, but there was nothing they could do. Lan Yu tried to get more information from Duan Mayan as to why they came to the Starry Crescent land, and found out that the raiders were only here because of the signals that were transmitted by the statues in the square inside the base of Blue Fox family. The statues had been there for about 10,000 years, and yet Lan Yu knew nothing about the statues' communicating purposes. Perhaps their ancestors made the statues to connect with their people from their faraway homeland, so that someday they could return to where they came from. However, Lan Yu was not interested in leaving the place. The Blue Fox family had completely adapted to the conditions of Starry Crescent land, a place where they called home. They were not ready to leave this place and return to the Blue Fox planet at the far end of the galaxy. Contrary to the information he received, Lan Yu had always thought that the statues were dedicated to their ancestors. If he knew that these statues were actually some communication devices, he would have shattered them a long time ago. Fuyi offered him the choice to leave the Starry Crescent land in peace, along with the invaders from Blue Fox planet, but he refused the offer without any second thought. He would rather die than leave Starry Crescent land. In order to move forward, Fuyi asked him to investigate the opinions of his people, so he immediately gathered all of them and offered them the same options. We will never leave this place. No one here was ever interested in that damn planet. All of them chanted in unison. Hence, there was no need for any additional discussion. In order to prevent any further troubles, Fuyi had to wipe away some parts of their memory, so they no longer remembered their origin from the Blue Fox planet. Only Lan Yu knew the secret, so it served as a painful lesson for him not to repeat the same mistake. Lan Yu was well aware of the severity and extent of his family's secret, so he would never mention a word to the outside world. If the people knew the truth, the whole Blue Fox family would be accused as scapegoats by the angry people of the Starry Crescent land. They would surely seek revenge for their loved ones who died in the hands of the raiders. Certainly, there were conditions that came with the option of choosing to stay. All of the statues had to be demolished. Moreover, the wizardry barrier was no longer allowed. And finally, the people of the Blue Fox family were allowed to get married to the common people. Lan Yu agreed to all of the conditions. He was actually fond of a woman, but she was only a mortal from the common world. Due to the restrictions of his family, he was forced to stay within the limits and keep himself away from her. The abolishment of the marriage restriction meant that he was allowed to fight for his love. To repay the Lord for what he had done for the Blue Fox family, Lan Yu offered him an ancient book that was extremely confidential that had been passed down from generation to generation. These books were written in a font that looked like tadpoles, which could be the original language of the Blue Fox planet. However, as years went by, the practice of such language was gradually abandoned in the long course of life, so no one could read the text anymore. With that conclusion, the issues that surrounded the Blue Fox family were solved. After that, Fuyi went to study the weapons that the raiders left behind. He asked everyone to gather all of the weapons they could find, so that he could destroy them. Mu Feng and the rest of the team did not quite agree, as they thought that these weapons could be incorporated into their defense system to protect the Starry Crescent land from any future attacks. They told Fuyi about their thoughts. These things are not from the Starry Crescent land, and will only serve as an obstruction when we rebuild the wizardry barrier that shields the land. Also, these weapons will eventually fall into the hands of different powers, thus creating more fights and reigns of terror. Fuyi patiently explained. Chapter 27-22. Insecure about losses and gains 4. Mu Feng and his men understood the consequences, so they respected Fuyi's decision. Meanwhile, all of the invaders had fled, leaving the Starry Crescent land in its post-war state. All the citizens took up a role in order to rebuild their homes from scratch. Gu Shijiu and Fuyi then returned to the former residence of the Lord, the Biwu Palace. The 4 messengers joined them, along with the Muscle and Lu Wu. As for Kuan Shui and his companions, they were all assigned with different tasks and were sent away. Gu Shijiu wanted to take Dihao along, but the child was suddenly interested in Yun Yanli, and was determined to follow the man. Fuyi knew that everything that the boy chose to do came with a purpose. He asked no further questions and let the boy go. Yun Yanli could not keep the boy away, so he was forced to take him along. Everything in the Biwu Palace was well maintained. It was as if Fuyi had never left. The patterns that he painted on the foldable screens and the wood carvings that he personally created all re-emerged after their long absence. Every little detail was restored. Gu Shijiu naturally swept her fingers across the surface of the folding screen to feel its texture. It was her favorite landscape painting. She sighed at the sight of the re-emergence of the painting and said, "Fuyi, when you were immortalized, even the painting went away with you. When I first escaped the Forbidden Land, I was the only one who remembered about you, so I needed proof to tell others about your existence, but there was nothing I could find. The tone of her voice was rather mellow as the ghosts of her past had come back to haunt her once more. Fuyi knew how much pain she must have been through all those years, so he took her hand and comforted her. It is all in the past now. I am here now, and I will never leave again. He took her to the garden for a walk, away from the unpleasant past. They strolled past an artificial hillock, and she stopped walking all of a sudden. Gu Zijia's face turned pale at the sight of the fake mound. What is the matter? Fuyi did not quite understand. That is where you were immortalized. I saw the messengers soaked in tears over there. Gu Shijio murmured. Fuyi was quite surprised. He too remembered the place, so he knew that she was right. However, he did not understand how she knew about it. Shouldn't she have been in the Forbidden Land when the immortalization took place? I had a dream when I was still in the Forbidden Land that you were immortalized. I was frightened to death and could not even run straight. I kept telling myself that it was only a dream and that you would still be there, waiting for my return. I thought you were still waiting for me to bring you the herbs and save your life. Gu Shijio wanted to chuckle, but she began to choke with tears. Fuyi pulled her into his arms and kissed her softly on the lips. Let's not think about it. Let's forget it all. How can I not think about it? Gu Shijio protested. After everything that has happened, I still cannot find the courage to visit this place. I am scared that your existence is still imaginary. Perhaps everything that happened in the Shura world was only a dream. Maybe none of it actually happened. She put her arms around his waist and buried her head in his chest. I am still terrified. Like a child that had been burnt before and dreaded fire, she became very insecure about her losses and gains, which was different from her strong, usual self. Fuyi was equally touched and sorrowed by the depths of her love that brought about the insecurities. He pinched her nose and asked, "Can't you feel my presence right now?" Gu Shijio took a long sniff and immersed herself completely in his scent. She knew that she was acting way too insecure. However, her insecurities were not something she could control. Ever since their reunion in the Starry Crescent Land, she had never left his side. She knew that she would panic in his absence. Even when she was sleeping, she had to hold on to his sleeves just to be sure that he was still around. There was one time when she woke up without him. In a flurry, she quickly went around everywhere looking for him. If he had not returned in time, the entire place would definitely have been ransacked. Her melancholic sentiments and insecurities perfectly summed up her current emotions. Gu Shijio knew that it was not her usual self, but she could not help it. She knew that pregnant women would often get emotional and become anxious, so she thought that the fluctuations must be due to her pregnancy. Fuyi was a knowledgeable man, but not when it came to his wife's pregnancy issues, so he believed everything she told him. Therefore, he would take her around wherever he went just to make her feel better. He would also avoid going to places that would trigger her flashes of memory about her unhappy past. He thought that the richness of spiritual energy in the Biwu Palace would help to calm her mind. To his dismay, things were quite the opposite. He took her to the room and lay her onto the bed and said, "Sleep. You are tired. You have to stay with me," she insisted while pulling his sleeve. "All right, I will be here at all times," he reassured. He lay down by her side and hugged her. "Sleep. Will you leave?" "Of course not. When you wake up, I will still be here." With the reassurance, Gu Shijio closed her eyes and slowly dozed off. Fuyi observed her and noticed that she was not sleeping very well. Soon, her face seemed to be drenched in sweats. Her hands were reaching out everywhere for him, so Fuyi had to grab her hands in a way that she was familiar with so that she could calm down. The situation had been ongoing for almost a month now. He started to think if it was really normal. Fuyi did not find her overdependence annoying. In fact, he liked that she needed him. It was the change in her character that he found odd. Fuyi regularly examined her pulse. Everything was fine. After a while, he covered her up in the blanket and went outside. "Find me a few midwives who are experienced," he gave an order to Mufeng, who was there guarding the door. Chapter 27-23. Seek her salve where she gets her sore. Mufeng was dumbstruck by the sudden request. Midwives. Fuyi proceeded to place his hand around Mufeng's shoulder in an authoritative manner. Any problem? Mufeng quickly explained. Nothing. My lord. Why do you need midwives here? They are all mortals, so they cannot enter this place. He had a point. Fuyi then answered. They do not have to come here. Find me a few midwives, so that I can ask them some questions. Mufeng was really curious but took the order and did as told. It had been a difficult journey for the lord to return here. Mufeng still found his lord's presence a bit surreal and hard to believe. Like a dream that would disappear the next day. The 4 messengers agreed to guard the area so that they could keep an eye on the lord to make sure that he was real. Mufeng was undoubtedly effective in his search. In 2 hours, he managed to find over 20 midwives of different ages and experiences. All of them were gathered in one of the many halls of the Biwu Palace. Fuyi was still in the room with Gu Shijie. He lighted up an incense stick and swirled it around the room so that its fragrant odor could fill the air and make her sleep better. After everything was in place, he left the room and proceeded to the hall to meet his guests. The midwives had never thought that they would be able to meet the lord one day. When Fuyi showed up, all of them were so dumbstruck in astonishment that they could not even speak properly. Luckily, they had not forgotten about their expertise. They were ready to help in any way that they were needed. However, Fuyi only needed them to answer one question. What are the emotional changes that a pregnant woman might encounter? The midwives were a little nervous at first, as they were unsure of why they were needed here. They were relieved when Fuyi got the ball rolling with a question. They had encountered many pregnant women and dealt with their emotions, mostly daily, so they answered based on their own experience. From the way they explained their encounters, Fuyi realized that each pregnancy was different. Some women experienced no emotional fluctuations, while others became completely different from who they were. The ones that were generally quiet prior to getting pregnant might become suspicious, or even hysterical. Some women became depressed and suicidal. There were so many different causes, but they all led back to the same conclusion. It was normal for a pregnant woman to be emotional. Having listened to their stories, Fuyi was finally relieved. It seemed like Zijia's changes were really due to her pregnancy. Being sensitive was one of the symptoms. What should I do to make my pregnant wife feel better? He sincerely asked. The midwives looked at each other in consternation. Men would not usually care about their wives' emotions, especially if they were pregnant. In fact, they would be irritated even by the slightest change. In most cases, they would abandon their wife and look for a good time with their concubines. Only a few of them actually cared about their pregnant wife's feelings. It was rare to find a man who was willing to put in the effort to make his pregnant wife feel better. They were especially surprised when the concern was coming from the Lord, who was always known to be mighty and superior. They felt a closer connection to him all of a sudden. He seemed quite down to earth at that moment. The midwives offered him every advice that they could think of. For example, they told him to be present, to talk to her more often, and to do things that she loved to do. Most of the pregnant women would also become picky with food, so they suggested that he prepared her favorite foods for her. As long as she felt loved by her husband, her insecurities would slowly fade. Chapter 27-24. Seek her salve where she gets her sore too. Fuyi was enlightened by the useful pieces of advice given to him. When he was satisfied, he asked Mufeng to pay them some money and let them go. In order to prevent them from spreading the news about Gu Zijia's pregnancy, Fuyi cleared their memory of the events of the day, so they no longer remembered that they had seen the Lord. He managed to get what he needed to know, so there was no more time to lose. He quickly returned to the room as he was worried that Gu Shijie might become distraught with anxiety once she saw that he was not there. The whole process took him only an hour. When he got back into his room, he was relieved to see that Gu Shijie was still sleeping soundly on the bed. He walked out of the room and was surprised to see Mufeng by the door, standing straight like a wooden pole. Fuyi was slightly baffled. In fact, he never requested any of them to guard the doors in the Biwu Palace. Usually, The 4 messengers would be occupied by their own tasks and paperwork. Their workload was even greater than the president of a country. There should not be any free time for them to do something so pointless, like guarding a door. They would usually show up only when Fuyi asked for their presence. Why did he keep seeing Mu Feng this time? Did Gu Shizhou change some rules when she became the lord? Mu Feng bowed before Fuyi as soon as he walked out of the door. Are you really so free? Fuyi through him glared at him as he asked. Mu Feng blushed crimson with embarrassment. After years of working with Fuyi, he definitely understood what Fuyi meant by that. I am worried, he said after a pause. Mu Feng finally found the courage to tell Fuyi how he felt. Master, actually we all know why Lord Gu is acting this way. Pregnancy may not be the only reason. Tell me more. All of us are the same. We are all insecure. Master, when you called us the other day, we could not have believed it was you if you had not scolded us the way that you always did. Frankly speaking, we were all so happy. Mu Lei was laughing like a madman while rolling on the ground. Mu Yin kept slapping his face to make sure that he had not misheard your voice. Mu Dian first started laughing. Then, he started sobbing uncontrollably. I was so happy that I circled the place a few rounds and accidentally walked straight into a pillar. My forehead was left with a big bruise. Everyone else in Tianju Hall thought that we went crazy. He recalled the incident and shook his head. Master, we have all been waiting for your return for far too long. There were long, depressing days, which made the reunion even more exciting and meaningful for us. But the truth is that the long despair has also scarred us with insecurities. To be honest, we still thought that it was only a dream even after you called us and reassured us that you were back for good. It all felt like a dream that would go away eventually. When we saw you walking out of that spaceship, we finally believed that it was true. Master, we still feel insecure. Even though we are here with you and can clearly see that you are doing fine, we are worried that you might disappear again. Among the guardians, we agreed to take turns and guard the doors here. Master, if it is difficult for us, it must be even more difficult for Lord Gu. When you were immortalized, none of us remembered you, but she did. She looked into every corner of the place just to feel your presence again. Chapter 27-25. Seek her salve where she gets her sore 3. She searched everywhere, from heaven all the way to earth. Whoever she met, whether she knew them or not, she would ask if he or she remembered you. She visited the royal administrative centers and looked into every archive to find a record of you. But no one remembered you. Everything about you had mysteriously disappeared. I still vividly remember the look of utter despair on her face. She looked like she had just been abandoned by the entire world. Fuyi clenched his fists. Gu Shizhou had never mentioned anything about these painful encounters to him. Even when she did, she would only brush lightly over the subject. He never knew that it took her so long to forget about him. He could clearly picture her in a frantic search. The despair she must have suffered evoked a sense of pain in his heart as well. Mu Feng continued. None of us understood her. All of us thought that she had gone hysterical, or was perhaps possessed by something evil. We wanted to help her, but she was always busy looking for you. One time, she went out to the sea and returned without any memory of you. However, she did not get any better. She was like a woman without a soul. Nothing could spark joy in her anymore. She was just like a lifeless jade statue. As a lord, her mood was able to affect the weather of the entire continent. So for a while, the starry crescent land was covered in ice and snow all year round. The people were deprived of their means of survival because of the unnatural chance. Eventually, she found a way to go to the upper bound and stayed there for 6 months. She looked better after that. Master, Lord Gu cares for you way too much. After the painful loss, it is only natural that she becomes so paranoid about losing you again. Master, what she suffers from is the anxiety within her mind. One must seek her salve where she gets her sore. Give her time. Maybe she will become stronger. Fuyi agreed with a nod. When Gu Shizhou woke up, Fuyi was quietly reading by her side. The warm rays of sunlight went through the window and brightened up the room with a cozy late afternoon vibe. There were peace and solace all around her. It was always a peaceful time whenever he was around. She was slightly caught in a state of bewilderment when she woke up, which Fuyi noticed. As soon as she opened her eyes, he instantly looked away from his book and said, "Baby, are you awake?" Gushijio sat right up and said, "I slept for a little too long." "You must have been very tired. I am happy that you could get some sleep." Fuyi then closed his book and asked, "Are you hungry? I can make you whatever you want to eat." Gushijio was astonished. "When did you learn to cook?" With a slight pause, Fuyi smiled at her. "There is nothing difficult about cooking. As long as I am willing to do it, what can possibly stop me? This is the time for you to have a completely new appraisal for me. Would you like to try my cooking?" "Yes," Gushijio exclaimed. She no longer needed food, but she would love to have some comfort food, especially when she was pregnant. "What do you want to eat?" "Fish." Fuyi nodded. "All right, let's go and get some fish." The glorious red sun descended in the west. Orange tints suffused the blue horizons, creating a picturesque contrast of colors. Baffled, Gushijio was sitting on a roll of clouds that Fuyi had cast to transport them away. All she wanted was to eat some fish, but he certainly did not have to go all the way to the sea to get it. Somehow, the place looked somewhat familiar. "Shijio, do you remember this place?" "Yes, the Crystal Palace is right under the water," Gushijio answered swiftly. However, her face turned a little pale at the sight of the blue water. The ghosts of her past had come back to hit her again. Naturally, she started pulling his sleeve. "You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure."